Welcome back to the Deep Weeb podcast. I'm KanjiEater doing another interview on learning Japanese and, better yet, using Japanese. And I've brought with me a few familiar faces. Welcome back, the Doth.
Hey.
And
good to be here.
Yeah, thank you. We've also brought back the legend. They let him back into Japan. Welcome back, Ham.
Good to be back.
So before we get started on today's interview, quick shout out to Jack the Giant, $50 patron. You can support the podcast that way, or just like, subscribe, share. It's very much appreciated. Also, Godai 4970 for the timestamps on the last episode. I did actually just do a solo Deep Weeb podcast 2 weeks ago. So if you're wondering what I was up to over the last year and a half or so since the Aussie Man interview, that's the video to check out. Finally, quick shout out to Jama and Shoei for giving us a place to do some of these questions and make sure that these are somewhere that the people could ask all their questions, because they had a lot for you, Darius. And so let's real quick do a quick intro for Darius. He's been a longtime Japanese learner for around 14 years. He's working at a Japanese company in Japan. He interprets at anime conventions. 11 years of it answering your questions on Japanese language Stack Exchange, top 20 highest rated users. He's read over 100 books and has above average taste for a fellow gaijin. He's been developing YOMITAN, and finally he is a fan favorite over at the THEMOEWAY Discord service. So thank you very much, Darius, for joining us. How you doing?
Good. Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for the introduction. Hi, I'm Darius.
I messed it up already. He just corrected me before the show because I was
the pitch,
like,
man, the pitch.
That's what I was thinking.
Oh man, I can't believe I already screwed that up. Sorry, it's Darius, not Darius. Yeah, we'll get it by the end of this conversation. We'll get it. So
yeah, Leviosa, not Leviosa, whatever it is. Yeah. I've been sort of in the Japanese communities for like a super long time on the internet. I started out first on IRC on Freenode, the like double hash Japanese channel, and eventually IRC sort of died and I moved to Discord, and I've been on like a ton of different Japanese Discords, so I suppose some people might know me from there. Lately I've also been doing some like I have one video on YouTube regarding pitch, so maybe you've seen that. So
it's a good one.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, to any of my fans, thanks for watching. Don't have many, but so that's basically where people might know me from, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. So why don't you get us started with telling us a little bit about how you really started getting into Japanese and what kind of led to your culmination of, making it all the way to Japan. So where did all this kick off from?
Sure. So, I mean, I guess if we start at the like very beginning, the sort of thing that got me interested initially was anime, which is, very story. And in my case, I grew up in America, so I was watching just like English dubbed anime initially, like just what's it called, on Toonami, on Cartoon Network. Yeah, classic. And I was watching like Naruto and Dragon Ball Z and that stuff. And of course, the episodes are like very delayed compared to the broadcast in Japan. Mm-hmm. And at some point, I somehow realized that, and I was like, wait, there's like hundreds of episodes that I could watch right now if I just watched them online. And so I started watching stuff online. At the time, of course, it was pirated because that was all that existed at the time. There's no legal simulcast or anything. And there was like people who are fan subbing it. And I started watching like fan subbed anime with English subs. So that was sort of what introduced me to the Japanese language. And at the time, I of course didn't immediately start trying to learn it. I was just watching anime basically. And that was sort of like my first arc in my learning journey, I guess you could say, which was just like watching a lot of anime. And at the very beginning, I wasn't really interested in learning the language, but I'm like naturally a logical like puzzle solver of sorts. So like if I just see that much new content, like I'll start to try and like understand what's going on under their hood, so to speak. So I would like slowly start building a mental model of like what words mean, how the pronunciation works, and even like without, I think, ever opening a grammar guide or anything, like I got like a decent understanding I wouldn't say I was like even at like near basic fluency at the time, but like after 2 or 3 years of just watching anime, like I could understand basic conversations, like very, very basic conversations. Yeah. So yeah, that was the like first arc. And then after that, I like actually got interested enough to like open up a grammar guide, which is I think Taya Kim's grammar guide, one of the like OG grammar guides. And I also joined my like first online community, which is the Freenode IRC channel, Japanese IRC channel.
So I haven't heard anything about that one, I guess because I wasn't there for it. It was just IRC talking about learning Japanese with other nerds online.
Yes, exactly. That's the best possible explanation. And it's Freenode, so I guess I should explain this for people who have no idea what I'm talking about. IRC is a really old technology used for chatting before we had Discord, before we had anything else. It was like one of the first. It's like a super basic protocol. It's literally just text, no emojis, no nothing, right? And one of the so-called IRC networks was called Freenode, and it like had a bunch of like programming related content. It was like for programmers and open source developers and stuff. And they also had some off-topic channels, and one of those off-topic channels was the Japanese channel. So literally, I was in there talking about Japanese with a bunch of nerds. Like that's the perfect description. Yeah.
So the Freenode arc, like how old were you at this point?
Yeah. So when I was just watching anime, so the arc before that, I think I was like basically in high school, like the beginning of high school, and then I joined like the Freenode channel somewhere near the end of high school. So I guess I was like 17 when I joined. This was 2009. I think when I joined that channel, and that's when I like that's what I count as like starting actually learning Japanese.
Okay.
Before that, I was basically just watching anime. Yeah. And so in that arc where I was like talking with people in English about Japanese and like reading grammar guides and stuff, I think I was in that period for like maybe a year or two or something. And yeah, and that's when I started getting interested in grammar. And also started getting interested in linguistics, I guess you could say, slowly.
Okay.
Where I would like read posts online that get more into the details of grammar and sort of like the logic of the grammar and detailed things like how particles work, like how the wa and ga particles and the ni particles work.
And at this point, was that in English primarily still?
This was all in English still, yeah. I would say my Japanese ability at this time was very bad, though I was building it up in like an interesting way. It was like I was doing the like sort of intuitive learning from just watching anime, and I was focusing on like very minute details of nuance with doing the linguistic stuff. It was like learning it from a very odd like angle that most people don't. Like I wasn't learning any like what we'd call them like stock sentences that you can use when you're traveling or like opening up a normal textbook or like any of that shit. It was like the most unusual angle to learn it from, basically. But yeah, so I just got more and more into the linguistic stuff. To like going forward a year or two, I was reading a lot online from a guy called Bart Mathias. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, but he was like one of the OG Japanese linguistics guys who posted on like this like Usenet Scilang Japan, which is another archaic.
Man, I thought I was into nerdy stuff. Dang, Darius.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, ignoring that. And I read his stuff, and also when I was in university, I took one Japanese course. It was like Japanese 101 course, and at the time, like I was beyond like what Japanese 101 could teach you, so I didn't learn anything from the course itself. That said, the professor of the course was a PhD student in linguistics from Japan, and he was awesome. So we would just like nerd out about like Japanese linguistics for like hours after class or something, and that was like really great for me. He was like a really great mentor for me, and yeah, so he like got me deeper into it. He shared a bunch of papers, and I have this list of like, I don't know, a couple dozen Japanese papers that I really like about linguistics, written mostly in English, but yeah, so I just kept on going deeper and deeper into that linguistics arc.
So on the linguistics side of that, like, have you shared out those papers anywhere? Do you still have references to those, or is those still useful? Because yeah, go ahead.
Yes, they are. That said, when I start talking about this stuff, people are like, should I use linguistics to start learning Japanese? And actually, I don't recommend that, really. It's like not that efficient a use of time.
Okay.
That said, efficiency is actually not that important in language learning. What is more important is consistency and just continuing over a long time.
Building words.
So, yeah. So basically what I recommend is if you're the sort of person who likes linguistics, or say you like computer science or mathematics or logic or something like that, and you might like linguistics as just a hobby in itself, then it makes sense because it's just an extra motivation for you to engage with interesting parts of the language. So then I would recommend it. But if you're just like a normal person who doesn't care about that stuff, it would just be a waste of time for you. So
gotcha.
Yeah.
So anyways, you were telling us about your professor who was pretty awesome, sharing a bunch of papers with you. I saw in the notes that this guy's kind of famous now. Somebody just recommended his podcast to me. So I was like, I'm glad you wrote it down beforehand, because I wouldn't have recognized his like podcast name off the top of my head. But yeah, tell us a little bit more about that guy.
Yeah, so this is Shimamura sensei. So he went on the Yuru Gengo Gaku Radio podcast, if I'm remembering the name correctly. And yeah, he became like semi-famous. I believe he's actually teaching English in Japan now at a university. But yeah, his background is linguistics. He's super like well versed in like hardcore linguistic stuff. So yeah, he's an awesome guy. We hung out like a couple months back just to say hi again, and yeah, he's a really nice guy. So yeah, maybe one day I can go on that podcast if they invite me and nerd out about like pitch with them or something.
Nice. Okay, so that was what, the beginning of the linguistics arc? Is that what we're coining that one?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay, so where'd you go from there? So linguistics to...
Yeah. So basically, after I finished all of that stuff, I still wasn't that good at Japanese, or like I had a lot of knowledge and I could come up with valid sentences if I had some time to think about it, basically. And from there, basically, I graduated college and I found a job. And so basically, I grew up in Connecticut, which for people who don't know America is like, doesn't have a lot of big cities in it, and I lived in like the countryside basically. And once I got a job, I moved to Boston, which is like a major city. And in Connecticut, there's basically no Japanese people really. It was like just that one professor I had.
He's the only one in the whole state.
Yeah, the only Japanese person.
The one, yeah.
Yeah, very much. And then when I moved to Boston, there was like a lot of Japanese people there. And in the first year, I was just getting used to work and stuff. But maybe a year after that, I started going to like Japanese language meetups and like other sort of Japanese related events within Boston. And that is when I actually started using Japanese. I started like outputting. So this was in 2013, I guess, and 2014 maybe. And that was like probably the most important arc in terms of actually getting good at speaking, because I was actually speaking. And it wasn't just speaking, but it was also about sort of mirroring people and like finding people who are good speakers, even among like Japanese people, and like thinking about like how they talk and what mannerisms they are using, even like nonverbal ones, and like sort of learn more about how to be a good speaker, interesting, engaging in Japanese.
So this is like 6 years, you said, to 2013. You still don't feel confident in your Japanese ability, but you started making friends and trying to mirror Japanese people.
I wouldn't say I wasn't confident in my Japanese ability, because I'm always overconfident in my Japanese ability. But nice. Sort of, yeah. What should I say? Objectively, like reviewing it now,
right?
Post-doc, yeah, I would say it was pretty awful. But at the time, like I was like, oh shit, I can talk, right? And that gives you confidence, right? Because normally you can't talk a foreign language, right? So, and also Japanese people are very nice. Like everyone makes it a meme that like everyone says ojouzu this and that or some shit like that, and they're like almost making fun of you, but they're not. They're literally just giving you feedback over and over and over again, right?
Feels good,
and
man.
It feels really good, yeah. As long as you're not like up in your head about it for like
until they turned it into a meme. It used to feel really good until they turned it into a meme.
Yeah. So I think that meme is like actively harmful, right? Like you should be able to take positive like feedback and feel good about it, because that like actually really helps you a lot. And yeah, so this is the arc where I started outputting, making friends, and making that like social aspect of it a really important facet of like my motivation, right? Because up until that point, it was like anime. There was some social aspect to it, like about talking about it online, but this is when I like turned part of my social circle into like Japanese people, and that was like a big step for sure. Yeah.
So, meeting a lot of friends, like what methods did you use to captivate these Japanese people into becoming your friend? Like, you're in Boston. I can't imagine there honestly being that many Japanese people in Boston, in all honesty, but maybe I just moved from Chicago, and there's a decent amount of Japanese people there. I couldn't find them though, and maybe I wasn't looking in the right spots. So, like, what was it that you did, or maybe they just didn't like me? But what was it that you did to, start making friends? How do you make friends, Darius?
Yeah, it's a great question. So in Boston, there is a decent number of Japanese people because Boston is like a university town. So there's a bunch of universities, so you would get the exchange students. There's also the satellite campus of one Japanese university there. And there's also like a couple medical related institutions. So you'll get like researchers and stuff who are there on like a 2-year stint or whatever. So there's like a decent number of Japanese people. That said, like proportionally, there isn't, right? So you need to like go find them. And as a result, one of the things I did is I started going to the meetup.com Japanese language exchange events in Boston, which was already like pretty regularly organized and like a good place to go meet people. Then there's also like a couple like events run by Japanese people for Japanese people, like a researchers forum and like stuff like that. So I just like searched pretty aggressively online and started going to these. And then once you meet at least some people, you can build out your social circle naturally, right? So you'll talk to them, ask them to introduce their friends, ask them to invite you to other things. And from there, you can like build an actual social circle. And I mean, there's a lot of strategies involved here if you actually like want to break this down of like how you build a good social circle. We probably can't go too depth into that in this podcast. It would take a long time. But like, for example, you can have something you call like a container event, I guess, where you will do something regularly that you host like every 2 weeks or something. You'll like go out to like dinner with some friends, right? And then once you're meeting people at other events, you automatically have something that you can invite them to as like a second place, right? So, oh, I always get food with my friends on Thursday at this sushi place. Do you want to come next time, right? And like there's all these like different sorts of techniques that you can use and just like build your relationship with people. And that totally applies to building out your social network to learn Japanese, I guess, if you're really trying to break it down like that.
We might have to dive into that a little bit deeper at some point on today's podcast, because man, I got married and moved again, and now it's like, man, what am I going to do for a social circle? I'm ready to start doing more with Japanese as far as output goes, that sort of thing. But I got a feeling moving away from Chicago probably didn't help in that regard. But let's not make it any more about me than it already is on the KanjiEater podcast. So let's go back to you, Darius. Darius, I'm sorry, man. Please don't beat me up after the show. What arc are we on now? As far as we just made some friends. You're starting to output more. That's probably helping. Where's the Japanese going from here?
Right. So I guess this brings us to like 2016 or so. So this is when I began to start to read. And this might sound shocking to some people who subscribe to like modern learning philosophies where you're like supposed to start with reading as fast as possible. I don't know how many years this is in, like maybe 7, 8 years, depending on how you count. And I like was literally illiterate. I don't think I could like barely read kana. And yeah, no kanji at all. And however, I was pretty fluent speaking wise. So I mean fluent in the sense of being able to hold a conversation and about like normal stuff. So my vocab was pretty small, but like I didn't like stutter or like have awkward pauses or something like that, right? So I was like able to fluently talk.
Damn,
in that
that's
sense.
better than me in English, man.
Okay, maybe some awkward pauses. However, I realized that my vocabulary was like super small, right? Because it's hard to acquire vocabulary by the methods I was using thus far. And I knew that reading was effective for acquiring vocabulary. So I decided to start for real. And I don't know why, but the way I did it is I picked up a normal novel. I guess it was Shitamachi Roketto by Ikeda Jin. And it was a paperback, like bunko bon. And I started just like looking up kanji one by one. And since it was like paper and there's no good way to look up the kanji, there's like no good OCR at the time or anything like that. So I started doing skip lookups. So for anyone who doesn't know what those are, you will like look up a kanji based on how it's shaped and like the number of strokes it has, or like some shit like that. And so that's what I would do for every single kanji because I couldn't read kanji. And I would do this for like 2 to 3 hours a day at the beginning just to get through like one page or two. And I did that like every day for like a year. And by the end of that, I could sort of kind of read very poorly.
Hey, Ham, does that bring you
Respect
back?
the grind, though.
Oh, yeah. Skip lookups. Does that sound familiar to you, Ham? Is that something you had to do in your no internet arc back in the 60s when you started learning Japanese?
I did because I did the RTK books, right? So I had the base, but there is still like if you read like the older books, there's going to be some stuff in it that's just not in RTK, and I would use like my sister's computer and use like the I can't even remember which website it was, but yeah, I would use a website and try and hash out which kanji it was via that.
Yeah, this might be the most brutal grind arc I've heard of on the show so far.
I mean, you love the grind, though. Yeah, how it works, So.
Yeah, and the reason I was able to do it was because it came from a place of frustration, basically, or like it just felt ridiculous, right? That I could like hold a good conversation and not be able to read at all, like the moment someone sends me a message online or whatever, right? So I was like, I gotta fix this, and I was just like, yeah, whatever, I'll just do whatever it takes. And I don't do well with quote unquote studying in the sense of like going through a book or a textbook or something. So I would have never been able to do RTK. We'll probably touch on this later, but I never did ANKI or any of that shit. So this somehow worked for me, right? Because I was just actually going through some content and just trying to learn from it in a really inefficient way. So yeah, so this was my beginning to read arc, and yeah, it took basically a year or two, I guess. Or it depends on how long you extend beginning to read, but I went through like a book or two in like the first year, and then slowly started ramping it up. I actually have a graph somewhere of all the books I've read and my vocab and how those two things like track against each other. Maybe someone can link it in the chat. But yeah, so that was the reading arc.
So how long? So you said it took about a year for you to you got through that first book? Did you start moving on to other ones at that time too, or was it just that one?
I don't quite remember. I think it was basically just that one for the first year, and then maybe I moved on to another one or another two the next year or something like that. Yeah.
Okay.
But I was like very inefficient at how I was doing it, right? So it just took a lot of time to get through the books. Yeah.
So then, like, next milestone after you started scraping by on reading, were you confident in your reading ability too at this point?
No, I don't think I was ever confident.
Okay.
So that's one of the
okay.
Interestingly. So yeah, I'm pretty confident about like my output and stuff, but even to this day, I would not consider myself to be like a strong reader.
Really?
In any, including English as well. So yeah, it's just not something I've been that good at. Yeah.
Okay. So you started reading at this point. Where do you view like the next major milestone?
So yeah, I started reading, and just eventually I would slowly read more and more. There would be like random bursts of like reading heavily, where I'm like, oh, I got to read more to improve my vocab. And this just happened on and off for like a couple of years, basically until 2020. And by 2020, I don't know, I would say I'd gone through like 60, 70 books or something. I don't know. You would have to look at the graph. And at that point, I would say I was pretty good. And somewhere within that time, I think maybe 2017 or 2018, I started doing interpretation at anime conventions in America. And we can definitely talk about this more in depth later.
Sure.
But that was also a good way to like sort of test my ability and feel like how good or bad I was. And within that, yeah, I would say I got to like 60 or 70 books, and that brought us to like maybe 2020, which is when COVID hit. And once COVID hit, I was unable to do like the social stuff I was doing as much because everything was like shut down. And I was spending more time on Discord. And at some point, someone on Discord, yeah, great use of time. At some point, someone on Discord told me in a voice chat that I was pronouncing a word wrong in Japanese. That I was using the wrong pitch on it. I think the word was yappari. I think I was saying it like yappari or like something like that. And someone was like, "Oh, you're saying that with the wrong pitch accent." I was like, "Oh, really? Okay, interesting." And I was like, I don't know if I should believe this person. It was like another learner. I was like, okay. And then I was curious though, so I like asked like a couple Japanese friends or someone on Discord, some native on Discord to like give me more feedback. And I was like, shit, I'm getting like a lot of words wrong. I was like, I didn't realize I was this bad with the pitch accent stuff, which was interesting because I had actually known about pitch accent for years and years and years because of my like linguistics background. And I'd even written an answer about pitch accent on Japanese Language Stack Exchange, which was like one of the top rated answers on pitch accent, where I was describing it, like how it works, like the basics of like, you know, highs and lows and down steps and like all that shit. And despite all of that, and even being like sort of conscious that it exists when I was like talking and stuff, it was still terrible. Like I was getting multiple words wrong a sentence, right? So that was like an eye opener for me, and what caused me to start caring more about it. And yeah, so this led me to my like quote unquote pitch accent arc from like 2020 to like maybe 2022, where I spent a lot of time doing what I call like corrected reading. So I would read books out loud to native speakers and get pitch accent corrections on what I read out loud. And yeah, I have a whole video about like the strategy I use for pitch accent stuff. So feel free to watch that if you're interested in the details. But that corrected reading like was really helpful for me, and yeah, helped me bring my pitch accent to somewhere where I would say is almost right almost all the time. But yeah, definitely still occasionally make some mistakes.
So to get people to help you with that corrected reading, what did that look like? Are you paying for italki lessons at this point? Are you just leveraging that network for free labor?
Yeah. So at the beginning, it was hard to ask my friends because I knew how like bad it was. So like it would not be enjoyable for a friend to do this longer than maybe 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Because like we would need to stop multiple times a sentence, right? And that's just, it's interesting for a while for a native speaker to do that, but like the amount of time that I would need to do it was like hours and hours and hours, right? So I was like, I'm not going to ask a friend to do this at this level. So I started using italki, and I forget how, I think maybe like 100 hours or something I put it on italki just this reading stuff. And then once I was done with that, I would say I was only making like a mistake once every other sentence or something like that, maybe. And that was a level where I was comfortable just asking my friends or asking some random person on Discord, hey, can you just read with me, basically, and correct me if I say something with the wrong accent. And then I did that for like maybe another 100 hours or something, or with friends in real life or something. And yeah, then that brings me to basically where I am at this point. Yeah.
So for that corrected reading, you were just reading it out loud to a tutor live, and then they would just say, nope, that one was wrong, and then you just reread it, right? Or was that the entirety of the method there?
Actually, so the method is a little bit more detailed. It has its own phases. So in the first phase, what you're doing is not just learning the pitch of specific words, but you're actually learning pitch itself and how to hear it. So there's multiple ways to do ear training, but you can also do ear training as part of the corrected reading, where you're saying something and you're getting corrected, and you need to be able to hear the correction, right? Otherwise, you'll just be like, that's what I said, right? Yeah. So the first phase of it is actually just using the corrections to improve your hearing and your ability to do basic reproductions, right? And that probably will take like at least a couple sessions, like a couple hours in total, for you to actually even be able to understand what you're getting corrected on and being able to reproduce those accents. And then the phase after that is like, okay, now you actually need to go through and learn pitches for words and repair any of your existing like incorrect pitches that you had learned for words. And that is just, a matter of volume, right? So the first phase is more about like not volume. It's like, I don't know what you call, like, it's more like depth of like making sure you're hearing it correctly, noticing any like small things about certain words that you can't hear it correctly on or you can't reproduce it on. And once you get through that, then you go to the volume phase of just like doing as much volume as possible so you can encounter as many words as possible and fix them all. Yeah.
That sounds like a lot of work.
Interesting.
Go ahead, Doth.
Yeah, Darius, so you did that all in like 3 years, right? You was like 2020 to like 2022. How would you, I guess, divide each phase into your years? Or is that kind of like a personal thing? Like it depends on each person, would you say?
Yeah, it depends on each person. I would say the first phase is really about, I mean, it depends on how you do it, right? So one thing I currently recommend is doing ear training with Kotsu, the website Kotsu, which like gives you minimal pairs and like lets you tell the difference between each of them. People have probably done that if you care about pitch accent. And that is something that I think is really effective if you're starting out learning, right? Because you can just sort of fix your ears from the beginning and like naturally learn from that way. And I think people who are able to do this probably learn pitch accent in a way that is actually better than what I did, right? Because I came in and fixed it after the fact and like just 무리하리 fixed it after the fact. So yeah, there's still parts that like I am consciously making corrections in my head, which I think wouldn't necessarily exist if you just do it correctly from the beginning, right? So anyways, yeah, to get back to your question, at least for people who are trying to fix it after the fact, I would say that first phase will probably take like a number of hours just to even start hearing it correctly at all. And then the next phase, the volume phase, will probably, it takes the amount of time compared to how many words you need to fix. So the bigger vocabulary you had prior to like fixing your pitch, the longer it will take to fix all the words that you like know the wrong pitch for. So yeah, in my case, it took like a couple years. Yeah.
Sounds like Matt vs. Japan was right, and we all sort of started this a long time ago. Time to get uprooted, guys.
Yeah.
All right. So, go ahead, Doth. What you got?
No, yeah, I just thought pretty interesting. So you got the, kind of summarize up until now. You have the big linguistics art, right? You studied a bit, and then you got the making friends art, I guess like the Diageo art. Moved to Boston, and then after a bit of reading, I guess, you became more social, got a lot of friends, and then we're at the pitch accent arc. What's the last arc? I mean, up until the present.
True. So I guess, yeah, I'm not just indefinitely thinking about pitch accent. So currently I live in Japan and I work in Japan. And yeah, so I guess talking a bit about that. So I had worked obviously in America for like 10 years at basically one company. The prior company I worked at was a tech company. And for a number of reasons, I was like, yeah, I don't want to work there anymore. And I decided to look for a new job. And I was like, I don't want to just do the same thing that I've been doing forever, right? Which was like working at a tech company in English in America, right? I want to switch it up a little bit. And I was like, I could switch up tech to something else, but tech pays well, so might as well stick with tech. But I could switch up where I'm doing it. So I was like, yeah, might as well go to Japan. I never really like even considered it up until that point. I didn't have a goal of like living in Japan or working in Japan or anything. I was just like, yeah, I want to switch things up a bit. And yeah, as a result, I like interviewed while I was in America for a couple jobs in Japan. I used a couple different methods, some introductions from friends. I also got introduced to a recruiter, and the recruiter introduced me to some positions, and I also applied to some online and all that stuff. And yeah, eventually I got a good offer and decided to take the job and moved out here to Japan. And yeah, so now I live here. And now I use Japanese at work, I would say half of the time, because my company has a good number of foreigners and a lot of the engineering work happens in English. But yeah, the other half of like the business and legal related stuff and all that happens in Japanese. So yeah, I would say I use it about half of the time.
Oh, nice. So like just pretty much living the dream, you know, already in Japan working, you'd say? Has it been good?
Yeah. It was never a dream for me. So living the dream for the people I did. Yeah. But yeah, it is fun. So it's very comfortable. I came here once I already spoke Japanese very well. So, and knew Japanese culture to a decent enough degree. And I didn't have any issues. I had connections in the country. I had friends here. Like all the friends I met in Boston would generally move back to Japan, generally Tokyo, right? So all the Japanese friends I had. So yeah, they would just all be here. It was easy to meet up with them, and they would help me if I had any issues. So I had zero issues settling in. The job is good. Yeah, everything is great here. Yeah.
Awesome. So I guess from here, we're going to kind of dive into just some more in-depth on techniques for learning Japanese. So first question for you. What techniques did you find particularly effective in learning your Japanese? And then we can take the second part of that, which is what was not effective. So what was very effective, though?
Yeah, so this goes back a little bit to overall learning philosophy of like, what does it mean to be effective? Does it mean to be efficient? Does it mean something else? And in my case, I would say efficiency isn't that important. I've seen a lot of people use like modern learning methods like the THEMOEWAY method or like Refold or whatever. And these methods tend to be pretty efficient, in my opinion, in what they recommend. That said, I see a lot of people do it for like a couple months or a year, and then they disappear.
Yep. Right. They pass the N1, right? What's after that?
Yeah. Yeah, for the amazing people who manage to like pass it in like a year or whatever, like they pass it and then I don't know where these people go to be honest. Like they disappear off the internet. And
right, Jazzy show.
Yeah, Jazzy's probably like off doing some like other epic shit, I'm sure, in his life. But like, I don't know, is he still using Japanese? And of course, like this comes down to what you want to do with your life, and it's like a very big topic. And like, one doesn't necessarily need to like master Japanese or like need to continually improve your Japanese or like go live in Japan or whatever. But I don't know. In my case, like mastery is one of my hobbies. Like that's what I enjoy doing in life, right? So I want to get really good at stuff. And as a result, there's no point in like trying to do that really fast and burn out. And of course it is like appealing to do that and like get like good really fast and like epic gains or whatever, right? But in the end, what really matters is like how long have you been doing it? And that said, you can't be like spinning your wheels for like 10 years, right? There are people who have been like learning Japanese for like over a decade and are like really bad, and I don't like they're like pretty bad, right? So you need to like have a certain amount of efficiency in what you're doing, that you're not just completely wasting your time. So to get to the question, what techniques did I find effective? I would say actually going out and regularly talking to people in a way that you can get good feedback on what you're saying, right? So this is overall really important in any method, but like paying attention, really close attention to feedback, right? So paying attention to how people react, paying attention to if they're laughing or like, you know, their body language, and like actually get like tune what you're doing based on the feedback from your environment, right? I would say that's really effective as a method. And also massive input. Everyone knows this at this point, but massive input is very effective across multiple different domains, multiple different mediums. And there's sort of like that debate of like, should you be reading, should you be doing mostly audio input? And I would say audio input is what I did for the first couple of years, and that was definitely beneficial in terms of like building a certain intuition about how to speak, right? And that helped me a lot with speaking naturally, I think. So I definitely am a proponent of that. That said, for vocabulary building, yeah, nothing beats reading. So you need to sort of like analyze your own weaknesses and what you're trying to get good at, and based on that, like balance that ratio a little bit of whether you should be reading more or listening more.
So yeah. On that particular point, is the reason reading is better just because of the pure breadth of vocabulary you encounter in written Japanese compared to spoken, or something else there?
Yep, that's one big part. The other part is that you can look stuff up. So if you're like, so back when I was watching anime, there were no like Japanese subs that come with it that you're able to like look up words easily or something. So it would be like a big waste of time to try and like look up stuff in a dictionary. So, and this is also something we should talk about. I was watching anime with English subs basically the entire time, right? So this is like an unusual thing for a lot of people, right? I learned Japanese by watching Japanese anime with English subs to a decent, like that was a decent part of my journey, right? And one of the reasons that was beneficial for me was because it was basically a fast way of doing dictionary lookups, right? So I would listen to the Japanese and basically ignore the English subs as much as possible. And then just when there was like a word I didn't know, I would like quickly look down and like just try to catch like whatever word that was and guess what the meaning of it was. And again, this wasn't necessarily that efficient, so to speak, but it worked, and it also kept me engaged because it was fun for me to watch the anime with the English subs because I could fully understand what was going on at all points. So I watched like a lot of anime, and like it was a lot of anime. I think if you look at my anime list, it was like 173 days worth of anime episodes, like back to back. I don't know how many hours that is, but like it's a lot, like a lot of hours, right?
I might be wrong, but it was like 500 series or something like that when I glanced at it.
Yeah,
that's a lot.
A lot.
Yeah,
a lot.
Definitely a lot. Yeah, and yeah, that was mostly during high school and beginning of college, I guess, where yeah, I would just cut my sleep really short and sleep in class. So yeah, I don't really recommend that very much, but anyways, that's what I was doing, and that wasn't really to learn Japanese. That was just because I like anime. And yeah, so I did a lot of that, and yeah, so it was effective enough, right? Like it kept me engaged, and it helped with the like being like consistent and persistent, and not being a complete waste of time in terms of actually learning new words and understanding intuitively what certain grammatical structures mean and stuff. Yeah.
So then,
right, Darius. Actually, I think that's a really interesting point, because I have a guilty confession to make that I actually did a bit of that kind of recently, and the reason was because I got an interpreting like job or part time, and I tried to like watch anime using English subs to see if I could interpret it similarly to what the translations are, or like how would I do and how would it compare, and I felt that was actually pretty effective or interesting, to get me into the rhythm of interpreting as fast as I could. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Like, do you think that would help you, or did it help you?
That makes complete sense. I never used it as an interpretation practice tool, but yeah, it totally makes sense. And even to this day, like, I might still like flip on English subs just for fun to see like how they're in. And I would say it can still be helpful sometimes, because you can understand something in Japanese, but your understanding might be a little fuzzy, right? Especially if you're learning something in a like natural way, and you're like learning from monolingual definitions and not using English, and you have like a whole just separate part of your brain which is used for Japanese, then your understanding can be like fuzzy in a very natural way. Like you understand what is being said, but if you had to explain it in detail, you wouldn't be able to do it, right? Or you wouldn't necessarily be able to translate it into English perfectly, right? And in those cases, turning on the English subs and being like, oh, that's what that word actually means, even though I've heard it used and I've used it myself and like whatever, right? And it can still be like interesting in that way to do it occasionally. Yeah.
So for the absolute beginners out there, would you recommend doing this still, or this is probably once you've hit some critical mass, right, before you'd recommend this now, or what would you say?
So I really think, again, it depends on the person and what your motivations are, what motivates you. If you're the sort of person who can't do the grind early on, I would actually recommend it. I would recommend turning on English subs because it makes it easier, right? And making it easier makes you continue doing it and makes you less likely to burn out. So like, go ahead, turn it on. And these days you can turn on bilingual subs pretty easily using like extensions or whatever, like Language Reactor or whatever it's called. You can turn on bilingual subs, and there's no downside to doing that, right? So turn on bilingual subs, look at the Japanese, look at the English, try to reduce your dependence on the English, of course. But yeah, I would still recommend it as an option, basically, right? Not as a prescription. I think it's still a valid thing to do.
Ham, do you have any confessions for us about using English subs recently?
No.
Chat answer, yeah, of course. Why ever?
Did you ever use English subs or anything like that? Do you have any experience that resonates or counters this?
I mean, somewhat. I'd never used English subs to like inform my understanding, because I was like really in like the AJAT mindset, right? Like you're making the new brain essentially, like Darius said, or yeah, Darius. But I also had the same issue with no Japanese subs, right? And I was, of course, early 20s illegally downloading stuff, right? But of course, the raws at that time were hard to get too. Like raw non-subbed anime was hard to get, and some of the stuff that you'd get was just hard subbed, right? So like it would have the subs on it no matter what. So I would take like my paper dictionary and I'd set it up before my screen so it would cover the subs. Nice. That's what I was thinking about when he was explaining that.
Analog method.
But
again
yeah,
for him.
I mean,
yep.
Yeah, but yeah, the subs thing, if it makes it easier, yeah, I think that's cool.
I see. But Ham, I think you also had like a lot of experience with translation, right? Or maybe interpretation too. How did you like, I guess, confirm that your translations were natural? How would you like practice? How did you?
I didn't start translating or interpreting until I was already like 10 years in. So I mean, I just did it.
Perfect, I guess.
Nice.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and move on to the next question then. So are there any challenges, like what's going to be the next arc here, Darius? Any challenges that you kind of foresee with your Japanese at this point? Anything that you're still like, I still need to work on that specific point? What's keeping you awake at night these days, Darius? Sorry, man.
Yeah, there's a shit ton of stuff, to be honest.
Ooh,
I mean,
I didn't expect that answer from...
Yeah, there's a lot.
Darius, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, again, I care a lot about, like, mastery and perfection, right? So I'm pretty strict on myself. But, so, I mean, I use Japanese at business, right? In business. And in business, you, like, need to be persuasive and you need to be concise and whatever. And compared to my English, my Japanese is definitely still not as like coherent or like precise and articulate, I guess. So just continuing to improve that, having an analogy or a some situation that I can sort of use as an example for any sort of topic that comes up is something that I sort of like have to some degree in English, but I don't have that much stuff prepared in Japanese in terms of like stories I can go to or like some like phrase or something like that. You know, that's just not as built up in Japanese. So yeah, my expressiveness is still not as high as I want it to be. So that's one part. Another part is actually still pitch accent, because I would say I don't make that many mistakes, but I still make mistakes. There's basically two categories. One category is just when I don't have enough mental bandwidth to focus on it, some stuff will slip. Like just a word here and there will just randomly slip because I just don't have enough mental bandwidth to focus on it. Another part is stuff like names. So like names, proper nouns, stuff that I don't hear very often, and they don't have like a clear pattern. I can still get the accent on those wrong, and I'm slowly like picking them up, especially now that I live in Japan and I'm working with people who I say their names and stuff. So it's slowly getting better, but yeah, I definitely mess up the pitch on those. So yeah, those are two big areas that I care about. Yeah, and overall, I guess you could say pronunciation and just overall expressiveness and stuff like that. Oh, and I guess the final one is my reading is still not that fast, right? So I read pretty slow. This is the case in English too, but I would like to read more, read faster, get better with some of the like more rare kanji, because I never did really like any kanji practice or stuff like probably Doth and Am have done, of like doing the kanken like decks and shit like that. I never really did that, so I still have some weaknesses with like the super rare kanji for sure that come up in novels and stuff. So yeah, those are the areas that I'm still interested in improving.
So Ham, with kind of what Darius was saying there, like, does any of that resonate with you at a high level? Because like I feel like you guys are so beyond me that it's like I don't know where the experience starts to bleed together. But it's like Japanese people names, for instance, is that something that like you're aware of with pitch accent? Is that something that like, oh no, that's probably something I have to work on too? Like, how does this resonate with you?
Well, at the moment, I haven't really been paying like any attention to pitch at all.
Really?
Basically, I just listen. Yeah, no, I don't have the time, honestly. With names and stuff, I just pay attention to how my Japanese colleagues call each other, and I just imitate them basically. And then I don't worry about it as long as I'm able to reproduce it.
And then kind of also to what Darius was saying about having enough context built up in Japanese to kind of represent yourself. And this is me paraphrasing what you were saying, Darius, so feel free to tell me I'm wrong. But having enough experience built up in the language to kind of be persuasive, kind of represent yourself with the same like compelling speaking power that you might in your native language.
See, I kind of have the opposite problem of Darius here, because he's talking about being like a weak reader in both languages. I'm not much of a speaker in either language. Like, I'm a quiet dude, and I'm not very, I don't know how you'd say it. I'm not like, I'm not in your face. I'm not, sekyokiteki at all. I'm like, and it's the same. It carries over into both languages. But I think, like, on the whole, I'm about equivalent in terms of like what I can do in both, but I have areas where I can't perform very well in English, where I can perform in Japanese, and vice versa. So like the technical like stuff, part of my job, because I'm doing legal stuff mostly, my education was all in Japanese, so that's fine, the technical part. But if it's just like the casual, you're like you're drinking with your boss or whatever, it's a little bit easier in English still, because there's just there's like cultural stuff that comes in with the just speaking as well. So like there's misunderstandings even if you're talking fine. You could act a specific way that gives the wrong impression or whatever. So it's kind of like Yep.
No, that makes
total things to worry about.
Yeah. It's actually basically the same for me. So it depends on the topic area, really. So for like business related stuff and like technical in the sense of like computer science, technical related stuff, those are stuff that I've done in English. My education was in English. All my work experience was in English. So I had very little practice doing that in Japanese. While on the other hand, like just basic day-to-day social topics, talking with friends, there's some areas where I will have like more stories prepared in Japanese because like a lot of my private life was in Japanese and I've been like talking in Japanese. So yeah, it really depends on like the area and like what language you had used primarily in that area up until that point.
Okay, so let's go ahead and transition to the next topic, ANKI. So you mentioned already that you didn't have to use it. You still got pretty far with the language. Doesn't make sense to a lot of us these days in the language learning community, Darius. So what was your experience for acquiring vocab without ANKI?
Yeah, so the reason I never used it was because I couldn't use it. I was like too lazy, or like I wasn't good at studying, basically. And so if you're the sort of person who can use it, I mean, go for it. I think it does help with efficiency. And if it doesn't make you hate learning the language, then why not? It helps with efficiency. So go for it. That said, I couldn't really effectively use it. So yeah, I would just do it the natural way. So you're still doing spaced repetition when you're naturally learning Japanese. It's just the natural spaced repetition of seeing words occasionally. So I wouldn't say I did anything specific. All I would do is listen to stuff, read stuff, look up words, forget them, look them up again.
So did you ever like even dabble in it for a little bit, or was it ever just like it was just like, nope, there's no way I can do something like that?
Oh no, I definitely tried. Yeah. So I think maybe the longest I'd ever done it was like 2 or 3 weeks, and then
okay.
Yeah.
So I guess my experience, because I've a long time user of it, but I've also gone probably a couple months without it here and there, and it definitely, I hear what you're saying that, you know, reading or whatever, using the language ends up being its own natural spaced repetition, but it definitely feels like simulating it, which is really what ANKI's doing, like simulating you encountering the word over and over, can just, it helps at least those words stick a little bit faster, it seems like. But I mean, and I guess for me, it still seems really frustrating to have to forget a word 8 times versus the 4 times that I have to forget it in order to get it into ANKI in the first place. And then it's like, oh, it's in ANKI, so I'll just remember it forever at this point. So I guess to your point, you're saying the efficiency doesn't really matter to you, though. So it will. I guess for me, it's frustrating that I have to look it up so many times, so that's why I use ANKI. But for you, it wasn't frustrating enough to justify the use of ANKI? Is that really what you're saying?
I guess so. I mean, ANKI, I just wasn't able to do it. Like I would forget about it, and when I forget about it even once, that would like kill my motivation. Yeah. Because I want to be a perfectionist, and yeah, it just like wasn't like a healthy way for me to engage with the learning process. So I just didn't use it. And you know, pros and cons on ANKI. There's one other con for it, which is that I think people who use it do sometimes end up with a little weird Japanese if they're not careful, in the sense that when you use ANKI, you are getting unnatural spaced repetition in the sense that it isn't the same frequency that you would be getting it if you're like reading normal content, right? Gotcha, yep. In the sense that you put some like hard word into ANKI and are seeing it over and over and over again, right? Because it's hard, you forget it, you see it over and over again, right? That is unnatural, right? And that can affect your speaking in the sense that you will start using some like overly difficult word in a weird context and you don't even realize it, right? And I've seen that happen before for sure with people who are like heavy ANKI users and heavy like novel readers. They'll start using novel words in an inappropriate like context where you wouldn't normally use them, and it isn't balanced with the rest of your speech. or like something like that, right? So like you can definitely effectively use novel words in speech and sound like eloquent and like well read and stuff, but that isn't how people end up sounding, right? It just sounds like you don't know what the fuck you're talking about because you randomly put in like a stupid literary word, right? So that is one of the downsides. So I think it's something to like be aware of when you're using Anki, I guess, of like, don't put in ridiculously hard words because it gives you internet credit, and instead like read material that's at your level, and put in the more common words. Just use it as an actual like way to speed up your acquisition of normal vocabulary. I think that would be the appropriate usage of it. Yeah.
So yeah, you can't use Anki as the basis for your output in a vacuum, right? That's what it sounds
Definitely not. And even if you're not doing that, it will still affect your output, like no matter what, because it's affecting your input, right? So
fair enough. So if you had to do it again, still no interest. We can't bring you over to the Anki side today, Darius.
No, I sometimes like float the idea of like maybe now starting to use it for like some random stuff, like either to learn like really weird vocab or learn some like legal vocab or like something like that. But I still don't think it works for me. So yeah, probably not gonna do
I mean,
it.
there are people that use it for computer science stuff. That never made sense to me, and I learned computer science stuff. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Darius, by the way, because I think you talked about in your, I guess, reading arc that you would be pretty consistent with it, right? Around like a year or two. And also in general, your studies were pretty consistent. Would you say that even without Anki, you already got like the SRS kind of essence with how you did study? Or then you felt that maybe Anki isn't even something you had to use per se?
So I would say I was actually very inconsistent with any one thing I was doing. So I was consistent about always doing something. So I would always be talking to people, or I would always be like trying to read, or watching anime or something. Like these days I don't watch anime at all, but then like randomly I'll just get hooked on it again and like binge through like a couple series or something, right? So it's like consistently inconsistent or something like that, right?
Nice.
In the end,
type consistent.
Yeah, in the end it works out. And so yeah, I think it did give me enough input in the end, like eventually, that I was always getting consistent input and learning stuff. But there's many phrases that at some point I was able to use well, and now they've fallen out of my active vocab because I just haven't seen them for a while. And there's just random stuff like that happens. I think that's natural. It happens in your native language too. So
no more watching Anki, huh? That just happens to all advanced learners, huh? At some point, you just have to start. I mean, it's not hate yet, is it? I know it hasn't developed to that phase, right?
Yeah, I still really like anime.
Okay.
And yeah, many of my favorite works are anime works. So yeah, I still like it. It's just like less time and less of the shows appeal to me. Like especially like the tropey, like I don't know, shows that are made basically for middle schoolers and high schoolers. Like it's just sort of like lost the appeal a bit. So I still like shows that are targeted at more like an adult audience.
Not keeping up on the latest isekai trends, I take it.
Yeah, not really. Yeah, I mean, I still appreciate it. Like if I just want to chill out, and I just want to think about anything, throw on like a dumb isekai or something, it would probably still work. But yeah, I don't have much time for that. So
gotcha. Okay. So I think that was everything on the Anki docket. Doth, you want to take us into the next section?
Sure. Or what, do you want to get it in English, or I just go in?
Yeah. Well, I guess I'll preview this in English. So we're going to be talking about output and that sort of thing. And Darius has already been talking about some of his, secret techniques he's got. So we want to hear a little bit about what Darius sounds like in Japanese. So real quick, we're going to talk in Japanese for just a little bit. And hopefully these guys talk more than me because I'm still terrible. But once Doth takes us into Japanese, we will be coming back out very shortly. So stay tuned. Go ahead, Doth.
はい、ご紹介ありがとうございます。これから日本語のコーナーに移りたいと思います。これ何かっていうと、皆様と一緒に5分ぐらいか、10分まで 話していただけると幸いです。当然、英語一切話さずに全部日本語で送らせてもらいたいと思っております。じゃあ、今回のテーマとしては趣味なんですよ。皆様から一応2つの質問をいただいて、それを踏まえて、一緒に話してもらいます。で、当然僕一応一番年下ので敬語で話してはいますが、皆さんどうぞタメ口でごゆっくり、好きなように話してもらえればと思います。で、まず1つ目は、最近、読書など、どんな小説読んでいますでしょうか。これもダリウスにも話してもらって、またハムとかも当然漢字にも喋ってもらいます。はい、ダリウス、一応どんな小説だとか読書は今やっていますか？なんか。
はい、ありがとうございます。そうですよね。多分、冒頭で話してたように、実は私、そんなにフィクションとか、別に好きっていうわけじゃなくて、小説、英語でもそんなに読んでないんですよ。で、日本語ではもう、勉強の一環で読んでいるところはあるんですけども、すごい好きで、なんか、めっちゃ読んでるみたいなので、そんなになんか熱くされないかもしれないんですけども、はい、
特に好きな作品だったり、
はい、
著者とかあったりします？
そうですね。一応最近読んでる本で言うと、グリーンサーガっていう先生の長編、小説があって、で、結構有名で、多分1980年代からやってる小説。
結構前ね。
そうですよね。100巻以上あって、で、それを今13巻目ぐらいだと思うんですけど、
まだまだですね。
すごいな。いや、でもすごいな、それでも。
小説はそうですよね。13巻もなかなかの量なので、はい。
そうか、特に面白いところだとか、これがぜひ皆さんに、読んでもらいたいだとか、なんか、売りとしてあったりします？
売りは何ですかね。いや、ジャンルとして、ラノベではなくて、実際のファンタジー。実際っていう、ちょっと語弊あるかもしれないけど、なんていうの、高校生向けっていうよりは、なんか普通の大人でも好きなような、文章とキャラクターとセリフっていうのがいっぱい入ってて、で、そういう、なんていうの、ちょっと自分でも未だにかっこよく感じるようなキャラクターがいっぱいいる作品なので、そういうところ結構好きなんですよね。
じゃあ、どちらかっていうと、中高、その学生向けではなく、きちんと大人向けの、作品っていうか、小説なのかな。
結局、フィクションで、なんか、なんていうの、もっと暗いような小説、なんか純文学に出るような暗いやつではなくて、楽しむためのなんか小説なんですけど、でも、大人でも十分楽しく読めるっていうのはあるかなと思います。はい、
はいはい。ウィンサガでしたね。
グリーンサー
ガ。いいですね。じゃあ、ハムさんとかは最近何か読んでたりします？
小説は基本的に読んでないね、最近。仕事の関係で、契約上のリスク評価の仕方とか、あと、貸金業法、犯罪収益移転防止法に関係する実務書とかが多いかな。
もう眠くなりますよ。
あまり人にお勧めできるようなものはないな。
そっかそっか。でもそれでも自分自身はそれ読んで面白いなとは思うんですかね。
いや、面白くはないんじゃないかな。実質暇の時間を使って仕事してるわけだから楽しくはないな。でも面白いとは思う。
そっか。やっぱこれがね、弁護士のサインなんていうか、難しいところではあるね。 じゃあ、漢字はどうかな最近なんか読んでたりします？
まあ、はい。僕もファンタジーが好きです。ちょっと、ポッドキャストを始めている前に、ダリアスさんが、ファンタジーがあんまり好きじゃないと言いましたが、まあ、ちょっとお願いします。どうファンタジーが好きか好きじゃないか、ダリアスさん。
いや、ファンタジーは好きですよ。フィクションはそんなに好きじゃないっていう、好んで小説を読むような性格がなくて、別のことをやりたがるっていうのがあるので、すごい読書みたいなのはあんま好きじゃなくて。
なるほど。
ただ、もし読書するのであれば、ファンタジー、もしくは SF が、
これだね。まあ、要はさ、いろんなことやりたいってわけでしょ？読書以外。そうすると、趣味がいっぱいあるっていうわけじゃないですか、多分。今最近やってることだとか。これも、一応、2つ目の質問に関連するところではあるけど、赤バカさんからいただいて、最近ハマってることってありますか？当然、小説以外。ダリウスはどうかな？
ハマってる。
ごめん。その質問前に、僕も、最近読んでいる本はアルスラン戦記です。はいはい。ごめん。質問を答えました。ごめんなさい。ダリさんもアルスラン戦記を読んでいましたか？全部じゃないか？
アルスラン戦記ね。そうですね。どこまで読んだっけ？多分全部は読んでないんだけど、10巻以上は読んでるかな。
そうなんで、全部じゃなくて。
で、アルスラン戦記は、田中良樹先生の作品で、銀河英雄伝説を書いた、人なんですけど、彼の作品も同じような魅力があって、なんかキャラクターとセリフが実際にかっこよくて、I don't cringe when I read it, you know? あるので、はい、そういうところが好きでずっと読んでました。
僕にとって一番好きなシリーズ、まだ、10冊に達しましたが、まだまだですね。何年ぐらいか、こんなに達しましたかわからないが、まだまだですが、好きなシリーズはアルサンシンキ。
いいですね。で、私、読もうと思ったきっかけが実はあって、どうやってたどり着いたかっていう話なんですけど、結構前に、多分紀ノ国屋で SF の、アンソロジーみたいなのを買って、で、それを読んでたら、その中に、田中良樹先生の、ストーリーが入ってて、それを読んでて結構面白いなと思って、でそれをきっかけでいろいろ田中良樹先生について調べて、でその銀河英雄伝説とアルスラン戦記があることに気づいて、で両方アニメ化はされているんですけども、アニメ見たことなくてどっちも、なので逆にどっちかから本から入りたいなと思って、で、アルスラン戦記のアルスランっていうキャラクターの名前は、実は昔の、ペルシャの、自身の、名前なんだったっけ、ナッダタキ・アルスランみたいな、そういう女子誌があるんですけど、そこから取ってて、で、私、ルーツがイランなので、ペルシャルーツがあるので、それで結構興味を持ってアルスラン戦記読み始めたんですけども、結構全く関係ないということに気づいて、実際のアルスランっていう話に関係ないということに気づいて、ちょっと残念だったんですけども、はい。それ以外は実際にそのストーリーが面白かったので、はい、読み続けましたっていうのがあります。はい。
そうですね。じゃあ、先の質問戻りましょうね。
はい。
なんだったっけ、どう
あ、そうね。一応、そう。小説以外、最近ハマってることは何かあったりします？たださっきダリウスさんもいろいろ当然読書以外、もうリア充って感じで完璧社会人でもあるので、多分もう何もやってるか、皆さん、そう。それをちょっとやっぱり聞きたいなと思います。どうぞ。
はい。まあ、常にいろいろ同時にやっているところがあって、今一番最近やっているのが、YOMITANっていう、Chrome の拡張機能の開発
そうですね。
をやってて、それ結構時間費やしていて、でそれ以外は、まあ、法律の勉強もちょっと趣味でやってて、ここ数ヶ月はやる時間ちょっとなかったんですけど、まあ、日本に引っ越してきて最初の6ヶ月間ぐらいは、その法律の勉強もしてたので、そこら辺が趣味ですかね、今は。
そっか、結構違うんだね。法律。もうそのハムの分野にはなってるけど、それってきっかけとしてあったりしますか？
きっかけ
もともと
は、
IT でしょ？ IT。なん
そう、
で法律になったの？
確かに。まあ、なんだろう。もう日本語を話せるようになって、日本語でもっといろいろやりたいなと思ったんですよ。で、勉強したいなと思って何かを。ただし、何かを勉強するってなったら、英語で勉強した方が圧倒的に効率がいいとか、英語の教材の方がクオリティが高いとか、
確かに、それわかり
そう
ますね。
いうのが大半なので、そうじゃない何かないかなと思って。で、それは多分もう日本の法律は圧倒的に日本語で勉強した方がいいっていうことに気づいて、じゃあそれ勉強しようかなと思って、勉強し始めたっていう話です。
ハムも多分そう思いますかね。どうですか？
日本の法律に関する、なんですか、教材が日本語のものが一番いいっていう。そうだね。間違いないね。
じゃあ、なんだろうね。法律勉強したのが、もともと何か勉強したいけど、日本語でしか勉強できないことを勉強したいっていうわけですかね。
はい、それがも
ちろん。そっか。じゃあ、それから何か目的だったり、達成したいものってあったりしますか、ダリウス？
法律の中でですか、それとも。
そう。それに関してね。
そうですね。すごい明確なゴールみたいなのはないんですけど、まあ、行政書士とか取れたらいいかなと思ってて。
いいね。
はい。ちょっと、
言い切ったね。
ところはあるかなと思うんですけど、なんて説明すればいいんだ？弁護士、これ多分ハムさん説明した方がいいと思うんですけど、一応私からしようとすると、弁護士っていう仕事と資格があるんですけど、それを取るのに、その試験があるんですけど、その試験はめちゃめちゃ難しいんですよ。かなりもう死ぬほど勉強しないと取らないような。それはやめようと思って、で、それ以外にいろいろあって、で、その中の一つが行政書士。で、英語で何て言うか正直忘れたんですけど、administrative scrivener or something like っていうやつなんですけど、そっちの方がちょっと取りやすいところはあったので、いいんじゃないかなと思って、勉強してますね。はい。
そうなんだ。それって、じゃあ資格取れたら、実際、仕事上では何か変化っていうか、責任取れる、趣味って感じだな、やっぱ。
ただの趣味です。特に転職したいわけではなく、今の仕事にすごい役立つわけでもないので、趣味で取りたいの。そして、なんていうの、一人の日本に住んでいる外国人として、できるだけ法律も知った方がいいかなと思ったので。
すごい考え方ですね。ハムもそうかな。もともと弁護士になりたいっていうわけかなと思うんですけど、それ以外、僕たちみたいな普通の人は取れる資格っていうか、法律の勉強した方がこれとこれって何とかあったりしますか？
普通の資格とかか。まあ、結構、いろんな資格があって、でもどうかな。仕
やっぱあ
事に
んまないか。
使える、
うん
なんかでもね、役に立つんだったら多分仕事で言われると思う。多
うん
分。
そっかそっか。
多分、
まあまあ趣味、
IT 系の仕事で、お客様の個人情報を扱うような仕事であれば、資格があって、個人情報保護士かな、ちょっと名前間違えたかもしれないんですけど、そのような資格があって、そういうのを取ったりするのは、そういう人にはいいかもしれないっていうのはあるかなと思います。はい。
まあちょっと難しい話にもなってしまったんですけれども、まあいろんなね、趣味が聞かれてて、やっぱダリウス君すごいなと思っておりました。ダリウスさん、やっぱ資格以外もいろいろ勉強してて、趣味は、まあ、豊かな人生を送ってるのかなと、多分皆さんも理解できたらなと思います。はい。結構長引いてしまったんですけど、だいぶ10分以上になってしまったんですけど、そろそろ、はい、話戻ろうと思います。はい、皆様ありがとうございました。日本語のコーナーでした。Okay, thank you guys. We're back to English. That was a pretty long corner, but hope you guys had some fun listening to Darius and Ham, maybe some others speak in Japanese. So let's get back to the big questions, Kanji.
Yeah, the important questions, which Shoei asked the next important question, which is serious question. How did you become the Giga Chad, Darius? I'm not sure what that means as far as just physical physique or speaking output. I assume it's speaking output too, but however you want to take that and answer that for Shoei.
Okay. How did I become Giga Chad? That's a hard question to answer. I suppose just hardcore dedication.
There you go. Beautiful. So another question. This one came from Julian. Can you give us an update on the vocab size progress? So you already alluded to the fancy spreadsheet, which we can probably pin that in the show notes or something like that in the description. What maybe give us a quick rundown of what that thing is and what it represents to you and should represent to the rest of the world, because I hadn't seen anybody quite do what you've done there.
Yeah, so I don't know what caused me to start doing it, but either way, I've been tracking my vocab size over time. And the way I've been doing this is that there's this old test from NTT, which they made in order for natives to be able to like track their vocab size or test their vocab size. And it was online, so I found that and I started using it, and I figured it would be interesting to see how it tracks over time. So I made a spreadsheet where I recorded the output of the test into the spreadsheet over time. And I forget when I started doing that exactly, maybe 2017 or something like that. It's in the sheet. And I did it maybe like twice a year, and I've been continuing to do it. And you can see that it starts very low. It has like grades on it, like actual like grade levels. So like elementary school or middle school or high school or daigak, university student, and adults. And I started like very low, so I think somewhere in the elementary schooler level, and that's because at that time I basically hadn't been reading at all. And from that point, I started reading, and you can sort of see that based on what I read or how much I read, the vocab started going up. And I mean, how to interpret this really depends on what you think about the whole method. But in my opinion, the precise numbers don't really matter, and it isn't good to compare across people on this test that much because, I don't know, there's so many extra variables. Like, did you just happen to read something which included those words on the test? Do you happen to know them from your native language a little bit, like the katakana words or something like that? And just various other like biases that can creep in. So that's not really the purpose. It's more to, in my opinion, track your own progression over time, just as like an extra way to visualize it and motivate yourself. And it has worked pretty well for me in terms of doing that. It's like an extra motivation to keep on reading, because I see there's still stuff I don't know, and I get the like positive feedback of the line going up when I read more. No.
Sure. So the actual like mechanism of taking this test is what? It's like a page with a bunch of Japanese words. You click which ones that you know, which ones that you confidently know their meaning and their reading, correct? And then you just keep doing that until when? Like how long? I did it on one page and it said I was at native level, and then I stopped. Did I use that correctly?
I'm not sure if you're doing the one that
okay, maybe not then, because you have to do like, I think you have to do a lot until it actually tells you for the one that I was looking at, but that's what I was wondering for yours.
There's a lot of vocab tests out there, and I hate the large majority of them. The one that I'm doing is the one I sort of like the most.
Okay.
It's very basic. There's just 3 pages of, I don't know, maybe like 60 words total or something, and it's just checkbox, and you just check the boxes. And it just gives you an estimate of how many words you know. And then I compare that to another source of what vocab ranges are for different grade levels, and that's how I calculate the grade level. But and I forget the exact methodology they used for how they made the test. I actually link to it in my spreadsheet of the methodology they use. So if you're interested, you can read about it in there. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and start talking a little bit more about output and maybe some pitch accent stuff as well. So I think we already covered this from Madao, but how did you learn to output very well? You want to give us a brief summary of that?
Yep. So basically, it really is just practice, and practice in an environment where you get good feedback and you pay attention to the feedback. So yeah, that's the summary.
Perfect. So so this one was actually for me, and I kind of already led up to it, but for people not in Japan looking to improve output, what steps would you take to improve? I guess from my perspective, like talking about what steps would you improve to output when you don't feel like you already have that community of people, like actual native Japanese speakers. Anything there?
So you definitely don't need to live in Japan. I would say maybe even living outside of Japan can be easier sometimes. You do need to live in a city, probably, but when you live in Japan, you're living away from home, and you're probably focusing a lot on your studies or on your job. And if you don't already know Japanese, those things probably will be in English.
Interesting.
So it's not a great environment for spending a lot of time focusing on Japanese necessarily. Of course, you can form it such that it is a good one, but it won't be by default necessarily. So I think it's totally possible to practice output a lot in any major city, like Boston, New York, LA, San Francisco, etc., just by finding expat communities of Japanese people and integrating in them. For people who don't live in major cities, your only option really is online, right? The net. And I didn't really do this myself, so I'm probably not the best person to talk about it that much, but it seems that there's a lot of options these days, making friends on Discord, using VR chat, whatever. And it's just comes down to, can you find people who you like, that you enjoy engaging with, talking with, and can you come up with the strategy to consistently turn normal conversations into friendships and sort of that like social aspect of it. If you can figure that out, then yeah, it's possible to do sort of anywhere.
I guess for me, I kind of got demotivated just from not living in Japan and kind of feeling like it was an uphill battle. It's like, oh man, I got the time difference if I want to meet with anybody online, and I sure don't want to actually have to step outside of my room to do something useful. So the internet method was the only one that, was really appealing. But it sounds like, I don't know, I'm going to have to suck it up and figure out something else, either those online methods or maybe some small communities in the area, but I don't know. I'll have to explore.
Yeah, and this really comes a lot down to basically like your base social skills or like social anxiety, how much you have of it, and like able to overcome that stuff. And in my opinion, learning a second language is actually a really good opportunity to overcome social anxiety issues that you have. This doesn't apply to everyone, but it applied a lot to me, where in English, I actually wasn't that social, or like I was very anxious basically when I was in conversations with other people. Like I would always feel like I was being judged and, you know, all those basic problems, right? And when I started learning Japanese, I was able to sort of shed a lot of that baggage because it was just a totally different language, right? So in my case, like a lot of the anxiety was attached to words in English for me. So like when I would say a word, I would be like, oh shit, I shouldn't have said that, or maybe the person will take it the wrong way, or like all of those things, right? But in Japanese, I didn't really have any of that because it was new words and like it just wasn't connected in that way, and it had like less of a like emotional charge to it. I would just say stuff and wouldn't really care about, you know, what like emotionally care about it that much. So I was able to like go out, talk to people, learn what makes them laugh, do that more, and just sort of like rebuild like my social skills in another language. And that was like really, really good for me. And it actually helped me in English, like in reverse, because I started making a bunch of friends in Japanese and like talking to them in Japanese and realizing that, hey, it's possible to have these like really positive, fun relationships with people. And that like fed back into my like base personality. And I became able to do it more in English too. So
I guess, Ham, quick question for you then on that. Like, did you find anything similar there as well, where like personality-wise between your English moving over to Japan, doing things in Japanese, did you feel like that affected your personality, like similar to what Darius is saying here, or were those two completely separate things? Your Japanese personality, your English personality, were they the same? Go ahead.
I don't think I have a different personality between the two. It's more of like it doesn't feel like a linguistic thing so much as it feels like a social thing, you know, like manners, gestures, stuff like that. One thing I noticed was that after I spent like my first, I think, 5 years here, I spent it the whole time without speaking English the entire time, essentially. And then I went back home for Christmas after that. And for the first time I was back, you know, like in an English environment, and my family said that I was like really different. So I think I'm just changing like equally in both, like in the same direction, roughly. I think I did feel like there's like a bit of a difference between the two when I first started, like the first couple of years, but it sort of evens out, you know, like you just, at the end of the day, you're just you, and it depends on how much of that you're able to express in both, or like what kind of parts of you that the social circumstances you're in is able to draw out of you, you know. So I'm just the same in both, more or less, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think it does eventually balance out over time. And for me, it was just like an opportunity, right? So like it was a new language, new ways of interacting with people, new friends, new people I could learn from. And, you know, I didn't have to overwrite stuff as I would have to in English, right? It was like building something from scratch. So, yeah, it was really beneficial. And, you know, learning language as a kid versus learning language as an adult. When you're a kid, you'll have like these like traumatic experiences because like you say something stupid and like someone reprimands you or something. As an adult, it's less likely that that's going to happen to you. Like you're able to, I don't know, like digest what's going on better, right? So it was like a much more stable environment for me to like rebuild that social stuff for sure.
Doth, you want to take this next question?
Sure, yeah. So for the next question, do you have any recommendations that have changed about pitch accent after, you know, your first video you made?
I would say overall it's basically the same in terms of strategy, which is doing ear training, and then doing tons of corrected reading, and paying some attention to it as you're learning and like doing your input. So I wouldn't say anything has changed. Yeah.
I see. Good to know.
So Not So Stupid was asking, did you ever get any feedback from native people that noticed, oh, hey, your accent, it's diminishing.
So native Japanese people, if they're like a normal person who doesn't like study themselves, then they won't necessarily notice in that way where they're going to say, oh, your pitch accent is better, right? But they will notice in the way of like, oh, you sound better, like you sound more fluent, you sound whatever. And of course, this will not be noticeable unless someone meets you like before
Right.
and after you did it, right? And this actually did happen to me where, you know, I had some friends in Boston, then COVID hit and I worked on my pitch accent. Then I moved to Japan. I see those friends I had in Boston after like a couple of years and they're like, whoa, you like, somehow you sound even better, dude. Like you were already good before and now you're like really good. And I'm like, okay, the only thing I changed was my pitch accent and maybe like slightly got better at other stuff, but like it's probably mostly the pitch accent. So I would say people do notice. And also I get compliments, like just out of nowhere compliments, like talking to someone after like a while, like after maybe like 10 minutes after meeting someone, like, by the way, you like sound like a Japanese person. And there's one person who was like, you don't just sound like a Japanese person, you sound like you're from Tokyo. And I'm like, wow, that's like a pretty nice compliment to have just out of nowhere, like actually genuine, right? So so people do notice, and because I'm not perfect either, I would say you don't even need to get perfect, you just need to get pretty good. And yeah, it makes a difference for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome that you actually managed to get that feedback from people. So this was a question for me. So the last video, Darius, there were some promises for some more pitch accent videos. And now I'm not one to talk, not having put out, you know, I put out 2 videos this year and they've been in this one and one 2 weeks ago. So I'm not one to point fingers, but there were some promises for some hidden pitch accent jutsu stuff that nobody else has talked about. And that was Wolfie's question, which is, where are they at, man? What are we going to do?
Soon. So my excuse is that I moved to Japan and also like didn't have a computer set up properly for like the good first 7 months or something. So now that it's set up, I should be able to work on it. That said, I'm also pretty busy at my job. I manage multiple teams and and also working on YOMITAN. So
real life.
We'll see.
Yeah.
I'd have time. Yeah.
So I guess to be more specific, his question was, what are some of those techniques? Maybe we'll just have to hold out to those next videos.
I would say hold out until the videos because I probably won't be able to talk about like detailed pitch accent rules because it's entirely paged out right now for me. Yeah, that's how my brain works, by the way. I like aggressively forget stuff and then just like relearn it sort of on when I revisit it. So
interesting.
That's where those things are for me right now.
I gotcha.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Doth.
Actually, yeah, next question is actually from me. So you kind of answered this, I would say, but I was curious as, would you say you would advise like a specific approach to different type of people? And in this case, just simply KanjiEater, me and Ham Slice, you can see that we're a bit of different level, right? KanjiEater, you can correct me, but I see you as like somebody who's trying to focus more on just practicing output.
Absolutely.
Maybe have like some basic pitch study, but not really that into it. I personally see myself as I'm a bit used to output. Okay, pitch maybe not that good, but I haven't committed to study. Ham is confident in output and probably pitch too, but maybe he isn't devoted into the specifics like you. Do you think that you should like kind of gear your study, and how can we reach your level?
I think it does make sense. I don't know if I would tailor it so much based on level as opposed to like objectives or what you're trying to aim for and what matters to you. But I think, I mean, the earlier on in your process, the more effective simply doing ear training will be, right? Because then you can just learn words with the right pitch, and then you're just like mostly done. And the later you're on in your process, the more corrective work you need to do in terms of fixing mistakes that you're making. And yeah, it depends on how good you want to get and how perfect you want to be And I think the only variable you really change is how much time you spend doing corrected reading, because that is the most effective method of improving your pitch, basically. And like this other stuff of like watching, I don't know, Dogen videos, not to throw shade at Dogen, or like reading articles or something, I don't think it's that effective. The only sense it's effective is in the sense that it gives you another way to engage with the topic. So like if you find that intellectually stimulating and you like reading about rules and stuff, like I actually do myself, then go for it. But I don't think it will give you the amount of benefit that you would probably want to see in terms of actually getting better pitch. So yeah, I just highly recommend doing corrected reading, basically.
I see. So maybe like listening or perception for kanji, I guess just corrected reading for me or Ham. But what about yourself? How do you approach pitch now? As the master, you could say.
Not master. I guess so. I haven't been focusing on it too heavily lately. I just use Japanese day to day, and I notice myself make some mistakes, and I try to correct them. And I notice when other people talking, they might say a word differently from how I say it, and I take mental note of it. And also when I'm reading, I will sometimes look up the accent of words if I'm not confident about it. And yeah, I just continue to do that. Still, if I wanted to actually work on it more heavily again, then I would continue to do corrected reading, which I haven't been doing that much lately. So yeah.
I see. Well, comfy stuff then, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Nice.
I guess now we can transition into our next big topic, which is working in Japan. Before we do, I want to confirm with you, Darius, we're already up on over an hour and a half. Do you have an extra hour by chance that we can just keep going, or do you have other things?
Yep, I'm good to keep going.
Perfect. It's going to be a long one. Go ahead. Yeah, what were you saying? Sorry.
Are Doth and Ham good?
Yeah, they're good.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay.
Nice. So we're going to keep going on this then, because we want to get to all of your questions. Quick from chat, Inexplicabro says, WTF, everyone's here. Yep, everybody's here. The whole crew. So what led you to work in Japan? I think you already touched on this a little bit, but succinctly, mastery, I think is what you were saying, or what would you? No. Actually,
it was just totally random.
Really?
Basically. Good reason. I mean, I just wanted to do something different.
Okay.
Right. So I didn't want to continue working in America, doing like another tech job in America. So I was like, I speak Japanese. Might as well try living in Japan. I have friends there. So that was it.
Cool. So, go ahead. So anything, so for the journey to actually move from Boston, right, all the way over to Japan, what sort of steps were in between there? Because I know when I did it, there was like a 9-month process where I had to get a visa approved and all sorts of things like that. It took a really long time, even though I had like $1 billion company helping me out to do a lot of the lawyer work, the ham work as we call it. So what did that process look like for you?
So similar to what you just said. So I did my interview. I did them all like online over Zoom or whatever. Eventually I got an offer, took the offer. And then I also had I work at a fairly big company which hires a lot of foreign talent. So they had like a lot of like legal help and people who are used to doing this process. So they got in contact with me, told me what to do, did the visa application process. It went through fine. Had to go to the consulate in Boston to pick up the visa or whatever. Yeah, that was about it. And yeah, it took multiple months. And then, finally there's the flight to Japan, and you fly there, you land there, you need somewhere to stay, right? And Japan has this ridiculous catch-22 situation of you cannot rent a place unless you have a bank account. You can't open a bank account unless you have an address and a phone number. You can't get a phone number unless you have an address. And it's like ridiculous, right? So the only way it works is basically if your sponsor gives you a place to stay initially, right? And that's what my company did. And they gave me an initial place to stay for like a month, which gives you an address, which allows you to open bank account, get phone number, which allows you to sign a contract to rent a place yourself, right? And in my case, I already decided where I wanted to stay before even coming. So I had one of my friends introduce me to a real estate company, and did some like searching prior to even coming to Japan, and like nailed down where I wanted to stay, and just said that I'll sign the contract the moment I land. So basically my schedule is I land on the first day I land, I get my like Hanko Inkan.
Okay.
I make them at Don Quixote because that was the only place that would be fast enough to make them. Most people don't know, but Don Quixote has like an Inkan like creator or machine that dispenses Inkan for you.
Interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, I did that, and then on the next day, opened bank account, got phone number, and then signed contract all in one day for where I was going to stay. Yeah.
For the how long did it take while you were still in the States after they were like, hey, you got the job, to you actually getting that flight over there?
I don't remember. It was a number of months.
Multiple months, though. And was it the company actually working on your behalf to like tell you, hey, like these are the things you need to apply for? Or did you have to go figure that out? Because for me, I was getting told like, take these steps by these dates or else you won't be able to come over.
Yeah, my company subcontracts some of that to another company which specializes in like that part of the visa application process,
Okay.
Immigration stuff. And the subcontractor got in touch with me and was like, hey, yeah, do these things. It wasn't very complicated. I think you could do it yourself, basically, just like look up a guide and do it yourself. But yeah, you need the sponsor, right? So as long as you have the sponsor and like you can submit the application, then I don't think it was that complicated, but it certainly helps to have someone telling you what to do for the comfort.
Yeah, mine was complicated. I can't remember the exact detail, but it was like they were going in between multiple different types of visas that I could potentially get, and they ended up going with some specific engineering visa that it was like, okay, it has to be this company, but if he's not on payroll at this company, then there was some complication there because I was still technically employed by my American employer. So I don't know, there was a lot of weirdness there, but that was the complex part to me. So I'm glad it sounds like yours was relatively smooth.
Yeah, there's multiple types of visas. I don't know how they work. Probably Ham could tell us more about.
If we have a couple minutes for like a 3-hour detour where Ham could just break all those down for us, that'd be great. Maybe we'll save that for the end.
Okay.
Yeah, Darius, actually, on the topic of getting a job in Japan in the first place, right? Do you think that there's specific roles, I guess, I don't know, how would you give tips for people who are maybe outside of Japan to get a job in the first place here?
I don't know if I'm the best person to talk on this, because the way I got in was via like my tech background, and I had like a really good career in tech, and therefore a lot of companies were interested in hiring me, and there's a lot of open positions for me. So I don't know. That's certainly one path, but it's probably not the path that a lot of people would take.
Worked
the other
for
ones
me.
I hear about. Okay. So
That's the answer, I guess.
yeah.
Get into tech.
Certainly appeals to you, then yeah, it helps in a lot of ways. But if it doesn't appeal to you, I mean, I hear a lot about like teaching English, I don't know, stuff like that. So going to school.
I see.
So what does the interview process look like on your side? Because I was already employed by the American employer that happened to have a sister company in Japan, like didn't really have to interview. Had to submit a resume, but that was about it. They already knew me. So for you having to go through that interview process with Japanese companies, I guess first off, how many Japanese companies did you interview with? Is that something like you have a notionally? Because we had a past guest on the podcast, somewhat JP, and he was like fresh out of college, I believe, and he said I applied to like 50 places, and they were all telling me I needed a JLPT N1. I didn't have that at the time. So like, what was your experience like on that front? Were they asking for your JLPT cert?
Thankfully not, because I don't have a JLPT cert.
I mean, if you
all.
did, you'd probably have quit Japanese by now, right? That's what happens.
Yeah.
That's why I didn't get one, honestly. I hate tests and quizzes and stuff like that. So anyways, yeah, I interviewed at maybe like 7 or 8 companies.
Decent amount, yeah.
Yeah, a decent amount. Just to have as many options and offers as possible.
Sure.
I think I may have gotten an offer at almost all of them.
Wow.
And yeah, each interview process was different. But it felt pretty standard to me. So it wasn't like the Shinsotsu stuff that you would go through in Japan. It was just like a standard tech interview. So like you would have like a couple different interview sessions from different people who get like progressively senior or cross-functional or something like that. And sometimes it would be one person, sometimes it would be 2 people in a given interview as your interviewers. And yeah, it felt very standard for me. I mean, the difference is that half of them or more were in Japanese, but yeah, some of them were in English too.
Yeah, I mean, hearing the word shinsotsu, it brings back some PTSD because I had to go through that process. But
is that just where they put you in the white room with like the 3 interview people and they interrogate you for hours, or is it something?
Yeah, kind of. And sometimes you're in groups.
Yeah,
and it's just what are you gonna do?
So as far as the like, were there like multiple interview rounds you had to do with all those? Just pretty standard stuff, you said?
Yeah, just pretty standard stuff. Multiple rounds. As you go from one round to the next, you can be eliminated, of course, where they feel like they want to go with you. But yeah, having strong Japanese definitely helps. It really surprises people because I don't think they normally ever see someone with that level of Japanese coming through their process. Like even people who live in Japan and have previous Japanese work experience in engineering, at least, many of those people don't speak Japanese at that high of a level. So this mostly only applies to tech stuff. But in tech, if you go into a company that's either Japanese or like is very global and they want like Japanese ability and there's Japanese speakers there, if you go into that with a really high level of Japanese, they will be impressed and that will look really good for you.
Was that something they commented on in like during those interviews? I would assume so, but I don't know.
Yeah, certainly they would comment with their like shocked face once we yeah, and they're like, wow, like sometimes they would even ask like, how did you learn Japanese? Like they would just really be interested in it.
Anime with English subtitles.
Yeah, pretty much. So yeah, I would recommend learning Japanese as a way to boost your job interviews.
Nice. I mean, for the next 2 questions, you kind of already answered it. Like, how do you establish residency in Japan? And did you have to ever use a hanko? Do you have any other like tips or episodes regarding those 2? Residency or hanko usage?
No, I mean, yeah, hanko, you do need to use it.
So I didn't. What did you have to use yours for? But I was only there for 6 months.
Okay, I mean, yeah, you don't need to use it. It's like slightly preferred in some situations, like opening bank account, and in my case, also a rental contract. It depends on where you're doing it. Like there's foreigner-friendly bank accounts or like bank companies and real estate agents. And in my case, I didn't use those at all. I was using like a really traditional bank and real estate company, and I was doing it all in Japanese. So it was just like assumed that I would have a hanko, and that's what we would be using. Like, I'm sure if I was like, can I just sign instead? They'd be like, yeah, okay, fine. Because like signatures are getting more and more acceptable these days at banks and in other places. So yeah, but in my case, I used hanko.
Gotcha. Probably the reason I didn't like with my situation, I was over there for 6 months. The whole reason I was only there for 6 months was to avoid any tax complications, like with moving money through Japan, being at an American company still, so that the money never like had to go to a Japanese bank account is probably why I dodged the hanko bullet there.
Yeah, I mean, I had both cases. So like when I first came to Japan, with the help from uni, I made a bank account, but I had to use a hanko. But after that, when I like moved out by myself using like an agent or something, I would use the gaijin card and just say, no, I don't have a hanko. Can I sign, please? And they let me do it.
Yeah.
Pro tip. So while you're making your way over to Japan, I think you already covered this, that basically you almost treated this like a normal interview process, but were there any communities that you found particularly useful for finding those companies that you're applying to? Any connections there or anything like that?
Yeah, so I didn't quite talk about how I found the opportunities in the first place, right? So I used a couple different methods, but mostly I used my social network, right?
Okay.
So people who I knew told me about jobs or introduced me to a recruiter who told me about jobs. And the job I ended up taking was via a recruiter who I found via a friend. So it was heavily social network based. I did also apply to some random places online, but they didn't give us good offers. So yeah, it was the social network that helped a lot. And yeah, the social network comes from a bunch of different places, previous jobs, also some communities online. There's multiple, I'm in like 10 different Japanese related Discords, and I don't think I can go through all of them here, but yeah, there's just a bunch that I had friends from and let them know that I was looking for a job, and they made connections for me.
Fair enough.
I see.
Oh, go ahead, Doth.
Yeah. Yeah, Darius, I think you mentioned that you're working in IT too, right, in Japan, and probably a big company. What is the culture like? Because I think you also mentioned it's like half Japanese and like half foreigners, and use like half English Japanese. Would you say it's a lot better than in America you had? Is it like good for like Japanese standards? What are the positives and the negatives of your place, you would say?
Got it. So yeah, I work at a Japanese company, but it's very global in how it operates. We have a branch in US. We also recently opened an office in India. And there's, yeah, I would say like at least half of the engineers are foreigners. And yeah, so the culture is quite good because obviously they're trying to attract foreign talent, and you can't have like a shit Japanese style working culture if you want to attract foreign talent. So it's and yeah, the compensation is also good. That said, it still definitely has some Japanese aspects to it for sure. So I entered as an engineer, and now I'm doing management. And once you become a manager, I mean, this also applies in America, but probably applies even more so in Japan, that you do end up working longer hours for sure, because there's just so much random tasks that you need to do, lots of meetings you need to go to, so on and so forth. So I definitely tend to work longer hours now than I did in America. But again, that's both due to moving to Japan, to a Japanese company, and switching from engineering to management. So it's a bit mixed in terms of the reason.
It's funny.
I see. What does that look like, though? Oh, yeah.
I actually, I never told you this, Darius, but at one point, this was like probably 5 years ago, I was at a low point. This was like the week before they told me, hey, you want to move to Japan? I was at a low point. I was talking to some recruiters, and I actually talked to your company. And they said, when I was talking to the recruiter, I was like, yeah, but I'm pretty used to working American hours. Is that going to be an issue? And they're like, they're definitely going to do Japanese hours. And I was like, I don't know that I'm really down for that. And they're like, okay. And then that was where the conversation stopped. I was like, I probably could have kept it going if I wanted, but I was like, yeah, I don't know about that. And then the next week they were like, hey, Japan. So anyways, I thought I'd share that funny little story that, yeah, I've heard the hours are kind of nuts over there.
I mean, I would say as an engineer, they're actually fine. It depends on the team. It depends on the product and all that. Like if you're working on a product which is like having a hard time and you like really need to strap down and fix something, then there is that Japanese spirit of like sort of working together and trying to accomplish something as a collective. And in that situation, yeah, you would probably end up working longer hours. But for anywhere that's a little bit more steady state, like just doing the daily tasks as an engineer, doing code, writing code, doing code reviews, whatever, I would say that you can work American hours. It depends on what you mean by that, but yeah, you can work American hours, at least at my company. Yeah.
In my case, my American hours usually end before 5, and at the Japanese company, a bell went off at 6, but I was the only one that left at 6. So, and
okay, yeah, it's not that. So it's
fully flex at my company, so you can work at whatever time you want. You're supposed to work 40 hours a week because of whatever, and that's it. There's no core time. You need to like talk with your manager about like are there certain meetings which you need to attend and whatever, but yeah, there's very few regulations at the company level regarding that, so it's very progressive within Japan.
That sounds really modern, actually. That's surprising. I not that I've been looking into it recently, but that's the first time I've heard of that, so thanks for sharing that. So,
Nice.
Oh, go ahead,
So
Doth.
I guess
Yep.
Darius, you would say you got a pretty nice work-life balance.
Yep.
Because of no core time. So how's that going on for you?
So it was good when I was an engineer. Now it's not as good now that I'm in management, especially managing multiple teams. So, I mean, that said, I still have a bit of free time in the evenings, and I have free time on the weekend, so it's not like terrible. And yeah, so it's pretty good. I have some time to work on my hobbies, though. Over the past couple months, my girlfriend, who normally is based in America, is visiting Japan for like a couple months, and I've been spending a lot of time with her. So not as much time to like study law, because if I go to the library and study law for hours while my girlfriend is here, that's like a real waste. Like
Waste priorities straight. So
yeah, so I haven't been doing that, but she's going to be going back to America in January, so I'll probably strap down on the law study again. Starting next.
Finally, your girlfriend's leaving, so you can get back to that law work.
It's the time.
Hell yeah. Oh yeah.
Ham is just like, let's go.
Yeah, me and Ham will be best friends starting next month when I start hammering him with questions.
All right. So, what does a day in the life of Darius look like with the work right now? Like, what bring us through a work day?
So, yeah, unfortunately, right now it tends to be meetings from like 9 to 5, and then work on tasks from like 5 to 6 or 6 to 7, depending on what's going on. And then, assuming nothing is like on fire, I'll try to go home and go home and talk with my girlfriend or something like that. And in terms of what I do at work specifically, I work in information security, and I manage 2 teams. One of them is the so-called platform security team. The other one is enterprise security team. Basically, we're a cloud. Our company is based on cloud technology, and that means we need to make sure our usage of GCP and other cloud technology is secure. So I'm in charge of like the technical teams which do that, and I also interface with like the business side and the legal side, privacy, and just make sure that we have like a strong roadmap and are making good technical decisions in terms of how we're securing our product and platform. So yeah, I'll just have meetings about those topics, and I still do a decent amount of like technical work and technical like architectural work in terms of deciding how we should be shaping something or what decisions we should be making. Sometimes these decisions affect our platform, sometimes they affect the product, and yeah, just lots of decision making basically.
So you mentioned going into the office and coming home. So I take it you're actually doing like in-person work instead of. Is it all in person at this point for you?
Nope. So another thing about my company is you're completely free to work wherever you want, anywhere in Japan. And in my case, I picked a place that was close to the office because personally I tend to focus better in office, or I need to go there sometimes. Otherwise, I can get just trapped in this like bubble in my house where I get like demotivated or lose interest or something. So the physical movement helps me a lot. It also helps me set a schedule in terms of like I change stuff off of the physical movement. So like I'll go to the office. When I come back, I'll go to the gym as part of coming back from the office, or I'll go to the library as part of coming back from the office. And being able to set it up like that is really helpful for me. So yeah, I tend to go in a couple times a week at least. Yeah.
Sweet. So I guess we can now go ahead and transition into one more topic here. the studying law stuff, you've already mentioned this a couple times. What's the goal here? Again, just personal fulfillment, something that you can only study in Japan?
Yep, that's basically it. It's just for fun, and it's something that I can help to use to, I wouldn't say improve my Japanese necessarily, but like use my Japanese in like a unique way. And like, yeah, so that was the motivation with starting to studying it. And I do find it like somewhat interesting, like learning about why laws are the way they are. I like, in particular, liked reading about constitution and like constitutional theory and sort of like the basic fundamental human rights, and especially regarding foreigners in Japan. Like there's a bunch of, if you read the Supreme Court cases, which you do when you study this stuff, there's like some pretty whack stuff regarding foreigners in there, and like the opinions of the judges, and yeah, just reading that case law can be pretty interesting, and you end up feeling like a little bit motivated to try and improve the situation. And if I recall correctly, Ham, this is like one of the things that interested you initially in law too, is about like these foreigner rights in Japan and these foreigner cases. Is that right? Am I remembering correctly?
Kind of is. I can't remember specifically what I said, but it's related somewhat.
So yeah, personally, I find that to be pretty interesting. And as part of Gyosei Shoshi, there's a couple of areas of law that you study, and one of those is Kenpo, right? It's the Constitution. So yeah, I find that part to be semi-interesting.
So, Ham, is that any wild court cases about the gaijin that you've read that you can share with us? Any of them that stick out?
I'm sorry, you just dropped out like right as you're talking to me.
All good.
Like the internet connection.
Any sort of weird Supreme Court cases you were reading about with the foreigners that you can share with us? Any that stick out?
Weird ones? Not really. I think there's only a couple that are like really famous, and I think like if you study at all, you run into them pretty quickly. But it's just like stuff like, if you're a public official, they don't have to let you go into management positions if they don't want to, or they have like, you're not entitled to human rights under the Japanese Constitution unless you have, residency, that kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Interesting. True.
It's funny because me and Darius and Nyangachi actually were doing readings of those in my server like a year ago or something like that. Good times.
You say your server, but it's the one I told you to make. So is it actually nice?
Wow.
Fair enough.
You got some drawing.
So, Darius, were there any that stuck out to you from your readings in your own server that you forced Ham to make?
I would have a hard time recalling the exact details. I think there was one. What was it about? Like a foreigner that like was protesting and then like got like
McLean.
Yeah, the McLean one. That was like pretty interesting, but I would have to go back and read my notes about it, about what I thought, to be able to have a like decent opinion about it. Yeah.
You gonna be
okay? Guess I know what I'm gonna read up after this.
Yeah.
Clean Supreme Court cases. Sure.
It's pretty interesting. Don't read the like actual court case like itself, because that's like crazy annoying Japanese. But there's like summaries of it, and those are like pretty easy to read. So it's actually pretty interesting. Yeah.
Good to know. Nice. I think we're okay to go to the next session, Kanji?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So our next session is personal life and hobbies. Your studies of law is one of them, but you also talked about interpretation, Darius. How did you get into that? And do you have any like interesting episodes?
Yes. So I briefly mentioned that I think in 2017, I started interpreting at anime conventions in the US. And the reason I started doing this was very similar to the reason I started doing the law thing. I was starting to become able to speak Japanese. I wanted to do something with it that felt I was generating some unique value or using it in a unique way that I wouldn't be able to use English. And So yeah, interpretation is one of those, and I like anime, so I was like, oh, why don't I just interpret at one of these cons? At the time, I was living in Boston, so I just online applied to be an interpreter at Anime Boston. And basically at these cons, there's two types of interpreters. One type is escort interpreter, the other type is panel interpreter, and also press interpreter, so I guess there's three. So for escort interpreter, it's not really interpretation, it's more escorting, where you're with the guest from Japan. So for anyone who doesn't know, there's these cons and they invite guests from Japan, like directors and voice actors and whatever, and then those guests will like have presentations and whatever at the con. And when you're an escort, you're just making sure that the guest gets to where they need to be on time, and then also go out sightseeing with them and like bring them to restaurants and all that stuff. And you need to be fluent in English and Japanese. That said, you don't need to be like super high level fluent. You just need to be able to guide the person around effectively and make them feel comfortable, right? So that's what I started doing in 2017. And there are places where you do need to actually interpret. So like when you're walking around and the guest gets stopped by a fan and they want to talk some, like you'll end up interpreting that in all those places. So you slowly get to like practice a bit of actual interpretation. And I did that role first at Anime Boston, and once I did Anime Boston, I immediately got invited to do some like other cons by people who are there as interpreters, because they're like, oh, hey, this guy speaks both languages, we should have him do other stuff. So I ended up doing some other cons like Otakon in Washington, DC, Anime Next in New Jersey, Anime NYC in New York, Animazement in North Carolina. And yeah, so I started as escort interpreter at most of those cons for like a year or two. And then I started doing panel interpretation after that, once I like got to a level where I felt comfortable doing that. And I would practice. So like when I would go and be escorting my guest around to the panels, there would be a panel interpreter there who is interpreting their panels while I was the escort, right? So I would sit in the audience and I would just like take out my notebook and like try to practice doing the interpretation myself and compare it to what the panel interpreter would do. And after I did that a couple times, I felt like sort of confident enough to try and do it. And yeah, they asked me to do it, and I started doing it. And it's always a challenge for sure, because you never know when it's going to go into some random topic that like you have no idea what it's about, right? And it can be sort of stressful. That said, I tend to be fairly confident on stage and like I feel confident in being able to work around like any comprehension issue I have. So the thing that makes me nervous is when there's like other bilingual speakers in the audience watching me interpret, because I'm like, yeah, they're gonna know every little thing I'm like working around, right? So that can be a little nerve-wracking, but in general, yeah, I think the first couple times I did it wasn't so great, and then maybe like the couple times after that I got better at it. And there's like certain topic areas which I'm okay with. So like anime for sure, like creation of anime and like basic like terms that are used there. So like, I don't know, nakawari and like those sorts of like production terms. I know those in both languages, like in-betweens and all that stuff, right? And then other topic area, which I'm sort of okay with doing, is actually law, thanks to the study I'd been doing, where like obviously I wouldn't be able to interpret like a full-on like court case or something, but I am able to interpret like public-facing panels on law, which is what I did at Animazement last year. They were talking about like adult guardianship and also just female rights in Japan. And I did the interpretation for those two panels by some lawyers who came to the con, which was pretty interesting. So
I see. Oh, in those cases, were you always like the sole interpreter, or would you sometimes have like duos, back and forth English Japanese?
Yeah, both exist. It depends on how many guests there are. So normally you wouldn't interpret for more than 2 guests at once. So once there's like 3 or 4 guests on a panel, you'll have another interpreter. It makes it clearer for the audience to like, can do the back and forth better. Right. And also I'm generally better at interpreting into English than I am interpreting into Japanese. And thankfully, since it's cons in America, I'm mostly interpreting into English. Then you'll have the question and answer section, and the questions I interpret into Japanese. I have no issue like doing it. Like I can get the point across, but is it like the perfect phrasing for like making it sound really cool or like making it sound really interesting? Probably not. So yeah, I definitely still feel more confident in interpreting into English. And sorry, just to keep going. Also, one other thing I did with interpreting here is not only at the cons, but at the business meetings for those cons in Japan, where we're like trying to get guests or whatever to come to our con, I would also interpret those. And those are different, yet again, where you're pretty balanced doing interpretation both directions and about like fairly complicated topics like IP and like distribution of the anime and how much people are getting paid and like that sort of stuff. So yeah, that was also challenging and something which also helped me improve my skills overall, for sure.
Nice, perfect. Are there any standout moments you had during those cons, like very, memorable guests or audience questions,
or just really weird weebs?
Yeah.
Weird weebs, that's all you have at cons. So yeah, no shade intended. So one guest that was pretty cool to work with was Kihara Hirokatsu. He's the former production desk at Studio Ghibli. So he was production desk during like what are the names in English? Totoro and Kiki and like those major movies from Studio Ghibli. And he's like a really, really amazing guy. He like you feel his passion when he talks. I recommend like trying to look up his name. He probably has something on YouTube you could find. And he's like also really great in person. So like I was able to like build a friendship with him, and like he helped me a lot when I moved to Japan too, in terms of like introducing like real estate agent and stuff for me. So he was a great guy, and yeah, there's just so many like nice relationships you can build like that with like really passionate people who have worked on brilliant works that they'll tell you how grueling it was to work on them, because these animes, especially back in the day, were not easy to make, right? It was all by hand, drawing each frame, drawing each in between, manually doing the photography of those frames, and like making all that happen, right? So they were some really passionate, amazing people working on those old school animes. So yeah, it's great being able to meet people like that and meet people who work on some of my favorite works. So yeah.
So maybe now we can talk a little bit about the tech. You've already mentioned that your hobby's been working on YOMITAN. I know I looked at some of the stuff you were doing, and it seemed like you were really kind of stepping up the level from where it was at, just as far as like testability, putting in things like playwright and all that sort of stuff. That's like, oh dang. As soon as you start having to do like end-to-end tests for stuff, like that's not only next level maintenance to know that like this thing's going to be really stable when it goes out, it also means it tends to be a lot more maintenance for the people that have to take that on too, is what I've found. So how has that been? And yeah, maybe first kind of tease us with what you've done so far with it and kind of where you see it going.
Yeah, so for people who don't know, there's the Chrome extension called YOMITAN, which has been like a really well-used extension in various learning communities for Japanese. There's other ones like Rikai-kun and some other stuff like back in the day. I think there's Rikai-chan or something like that. And they've been like evolving over time. But either way, YOMI-chan was like probably the biggest one, and also like the most feature complete one, with lots of like customizations and good integration with ANKI, and like a lot of people really use it a lot. And the owner of it, I guess you could say, Fusoft is his name. He's like a busy guy. He had to like move on to other things in his life. So he's like, I'm sunsetting the project. Please, someone else like take over it. And at the time, there weren't any other really active committers to the project. There had been like a couple months earlier or like a couple of years earlier, but they had also all gone on to do other stuff. And I was like, it wouldn't be good if this project just like dies, even though I don't use it myself, to be honest.
I was gonna say it's a little ironic, all the ANKI integrations being maintained by a non-ANKIer.
Yeah, and I don't like use hover dictionaries either because I read on my iPad, so I literally don't use it at all. But I know that a lot of other people use it, and I think it is a really useful tool for people who are like starting to learn now. So I was like, I don't want this to die. I did wait like a couple of weeks or like maybe even a month or two before deciding to do the fork myself, because someone else does it is probably better than me because I am like really busy with my job. So, but I was like, no one else is doing it, so might as well do it. And I decided to fork it as part of the THEMOEWAY community because I figured that would like attract more people who are in the community to help contribute and just have it like a vibrant place to do the software development work in. And so yeah, that's what I did. And in terms of the major goal I had, the major goal was to eliminate any work I had to do because I knew I would end up getting burned out if I had to repeatedly do some like annoying release work every time we release a new version. So I very quickly like built really complicated CI/CD pipelines, the end-to-end testing you were mentioning with Playwright, because every time a dependency update comes in, I don't know if that's subtly like breaking some aspect of the extension, and I can't confidently merge those things in, right? So I was like, I need to build good end-to-end testing on this. So I built Playwright pipeline, and also the other major thing was that we had to actually release the extension, and you can no longer do that with Yomi-chan's old code base because it uses something called Manifest v2, which is an old technology used by various browsers for building extensions. Now you need to use Manifest v3 in order to be able to even submit the extension to a store. So anyone who wants to fork Yomi-chan would need to do this work of converting it to Manifest v3. And so that was like one of the major big things. That said, I didn't have that much time myself to like go through and write a ton of JavaScript code for this. So like there was a lot of help from a lot of people in the community doing this. I think maybe like at least 5 people made major contributions in converting some part of the code or another to work on Manifest v3. I was mostly doing project management with regards to that. And then, yeah, just modernizing the project. So one of the things that I did was convert the system I was using to do script imports to use something called ECMAScript modules, which is like a more modern way to do that. And another big improvement on the code base we were doing was one of the old OG contributors returned toasted nut bread, and they like just out of nowhere returned and started like massively improving the code base. And one of the things that they did was do a conversion to do type checking on the code base using JSstock. And that was like a huge monumental amount of work that they just came out of nowhere and just did after being like completely gone for like 2 years, which was amazing to see. And so, yeah, we've been like doing a lot of code base, like basic improvements to make it easier for people to contribute and build new functionality into the code base. And that brings us to basically where we are now. And it gives us a lot of room for flexibility on implementing new features, doing new stuff. So one of the new features we're actually working on right now is expanding it to not just be Japanese, so other language support. There's one contributor, I think his name is Stefan, not sure if I'm saying that right, but he like had already been doing a lot of work on other language support, wasn't comfortable upstreaming it, but I think we should upstream it because it can benefit like a ton of people who are studying other languages. For example, I'm studying Persian, and like I've really wanted an extension like this for studying Persian. Also, sometimes I don't know words in English. It would be nice to be able to have words in English, to be honest, when I'm reading complicated stuff. So for all of those reasons, I think it'd be really good. So that's one of the things we're trying to implement. It's like a pretty big change. Another one is I think there's a lot of room for like basic UI and UX improvements of the extension. So like the pop-up itself and like how it uses screen real estate, how it shows you different types of information, especially for advanced learners who have like multiple dictionaries in there, like good usage of screen real estate and good usage of colors to expose like different definitions from different dictionaries and make it easy to quickly navigate between those and check those and cross-reference them and that sort of stuff. I think there's a lot of room for improvement there. So I would like to work on that. Other ideas that I've had popping around are things like integrating like an image search into it.
I'm excited for that one because I've been asking for that for like years, it feels like, and it really just having images when you're learning the language makes a really big difference.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I actually implemented that. It's done. The thing is, I'm not sure. So I implemented it using Google Image Search, and that might run into terms of service acceptable use issues, especially if we submit it to the Chrome Web Store. So I want to like try to figure out, maybe get in contact with someone who could verify if that's an issue or not. If it is an issue, yeah, we'll need to figure out some other source for images. So if anyone watching this podcast, a good API for image search that someone could use from their desktop without an API key, that would be great. So yeah, those are a bunch of ideas. Anyways, my goal with the project is literally just to keep it alive. That's the major goal. So I'm very open to what other people want to do and just getting lots of contributors interested and building like a really cool tool together. So anyone who's interested, please help contribute. I'm basically there just to make sure things run smoothly.
Well, from behalf of the people that are actually using YOMITAN, thank you very much, because yeah, it is an invaluable part of most of our workflows these days, YOMITAN. And I guess just to make it really concrete as far as what this means for the end users already, like basically at some point you're not going to be able to use YOMITAN as it is. You'll have to upgrade to something else. YOMITAN seems like an appropriate new version for that, given the work that Darius is putting in. And then also just some usability things have already been going up. Like if you move from like one device to another, it's always been a really big pain to import all the dictionaries that you had before. So if, like you said, like Darius was saying, if you're using 20 dictionaries, which isn't that uncommon in this neck of the woods, like then doing that was super manual. So now there's ways that you can just run a couple little scripts, make it super easy to have the same setup on multiple devices. So it's making a real impact. I know probably people's eyes start to glaze over once we start talking about JS docs and that sort of thing. But I mean, if you can listen to him talk about, you know, legal stuff, I'm sure they probably stuck through that too. All right.
Yep.
So moving on, we've got a little bit more conversation about kind of where the language learning landscape is headed. Jack the Giant and Loomer were asking about this. So I know both of you are developers, software engineers, whatever it's called, superhumans. I wonder, how do you see the future of language learning, particularly in the case of Japanese? What do you think about the integration of AI thus far? Further development of tools around it will get us. I just want to hear some speculation of ideas from those who know more than us regular folks. Yes, we got the inside scoop on AI. Darius, are we ready to reveal this?
Sure. Yeah, I didn't come prepared to answer questions about AI, but I'm
kind of just everyday conversation at this point. You got to be ready. Being a tech, you know, grandma's going to call you up and ask you about what all this means.
Yeah. So regarding language learning, I think at the current level, it's not that useful in terms of like just like opening a page with GPT and like asking it to teach you Japanese. Like it's going to give you lots of like messed up stuff. That said, maybe in the near future, it will get much better. So yeah, I think it would be a speculation to say much more than that. But I think probably in like the next year or two, it could become a really like useful tool to aid your language learning. The places where I would like to see it get used more is more, I could say maybe on like the back end, so to speak, where you use it to build useful corpuses and like use it to rate your example sentence data or something like that, like as part of the data processing pipeline, to like build higher quality material for people. I also think it might be interesting to start like generating content specific summaries, or like, for example, when you're reading a book, wouldn't it be nice if you automatically had summaries of what each character is, or what happened up until that point in the previous series, previous entry in the series, or the stuff like that. Like use it in terms of like summarizing material, or generating these like blurbs, which make it easier for you to actually input your whatever you're inputting. So yeah, I think there's a lot of places it could be used, and yeah, I'd be excited to see how people use it.
So yeah, I've already been using it for occasionally asking for alternative ways to say stuff. So it's like, it might not give you exactly what you want. A lot of times, at least with Japanese, it'll just automatically upgrade you to Keigo if you don't even want to use it. You know what I mean? So it'll just like change the phrasings, that sort of stuff. But at least you can see some alternatives, and I guess depending on where you're at, you can be like, oh yeah, this is more what I was looking for, or that. But you kind of have to have that human in the loop of that.
Yeah, unfortunately, at the current level of quality it is, the alternatives it gives you is usually bad.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
I've gotten, I feel like I've gotten, I guess I would probably have to bring some concrete examples, but yeah, I feel like I've gotten a mixed bag, because I do hear what you're saying though. Yeah,
so it, not to like diss you, but it is dissing you. Like, it depends on your level. Like, sure. If you're a beginner, everything that GPT outputs looks correct, just because like it looks correct. You have no idea, right? And even if you're intermediate and you can see what it's outputting is grammatical, so you think, oh, I guess it's fine. Still, what I notice is that it often seems very influenced by English. So it's going to give you something that sounds like really like directly interpreted from English, even if you ask the question in Japanese about a Japanese sentence. To reword the Japanese, it will still give you back Japanese that sounds like directly translated English. So
interesting.
Yeah,
I haven't picked up on that.
Wouldn't really recommend using it as a heavy tool in that sense.
Yeah, and then I've also used it in the regard that you were just talking about, where like you want to auto summarize something. Where one time I was like reading something for a while, I was like, I don't think I actually understood what just happened in the last 5 minutes. I was like, I don't really want to reread all that. So quick summary, and just copy pasted the text from that, and that was useful too. What do you see as far as the technology evolving to, as far as like where do you see the gaps still with technology with language learning?
Pretty broad question. Yeah, gaps with language learning. I mean, yeah.
If we made it more concrete, it's like, are there still places where you see like, it'd be really nice if there was a tool to help out with this specific thing in my language learning process?
Yeah, I think more augmented reading tools. So like YOMITAN pop-up dictionary is one thing, but I think you could imagine even more in terms of something that exposes you to more useful information as you're reading, and giving you more useful suggestions about, I don't know, maybe it could give you suggestions about like something else you should read in order to learn more about this topic, or learn these words, or something like that, and just help guide your immersion a little bit more using massive amounts of data. I think that would probably be useful. Also, I guess with regards to pitch accent, there's lots of things you could imagine that would be useful there if the technology evolves, like something which automatically grades your pitch accent. There's plenty of tools which try to do this, but none of them are good. So something which maybe uses some like very recent like deep learning techniques to build like a good recognition model for pitch accent and grade it like very well. That would be like a really useful tool for people. So yeah, maybe those are some areas that people could explore during development in.
I guess the places that I still see it that's like most obvious to me are, there are a lot of different places where, like, now that Whisper has been introduced, which is pretty it's better than YouTube subs, which I know that's a auto-generated YouTube subs are maybe a low bar, but The Whisper stuff is really pretty incredible, what I've seen that being able to do already. And then if you can take, so Whisper, for people that don't know, made by the same people that made ChatGPT, but it's an open source model that can basically make subtitles dynamically to audio content. And so I think one of the things that I would see happening is starting to make more use of that, specifically if, for instance, just being able to make better on-timed subs that are like Japanese subs. So like there's not really a good tool, like if you have a piece of media right now, to just go download the right subs for it, sync it up appropriately using something like Whisper to say like, hey, we have the sub file, match that up to the audio timings of it, and then use something like that. So I think that would also be a really useful thing, especially since it seems like we have all the tools to make that, just nobody's actually done that one yet. Another one that kind of was jumping to my mind was there's already things like that I've made the audiobook text sync, which is, it's pretty cool. It just makes subtitles for whatever audiobook you're watching, right? And then uses the book transcript so that it's exactly 1-to-1. I think over time, those things will just become more and more accurate, where maybe you don't actually even need the original transcript, because we can get to a point where this is basically going to be 99% correct, just auto-generated. And I think that would be really useful. And then like the last thing would be, I think with people that are doing like streaming of content, like I've been doing like table talk RPG sessions in Japanese, just like as my form of output. And it would still be really useful if I could just like, when I kind of like your English sub method, where it's like, oh, I didn't actually catch that thing, let me just glance at what was going on. Use that as the occasional crutch for things that are actually happening in real time, right? And there are already things like that kind of in like Google Meet has something kind of like that, but something that was open source that you could just apply to any stream, I think would be really useful. And I've seen people start to play around with that, but I haven't actually seen anybody make that a concrete tool yet. So those are a couple things that I had thought of. Any comments or thoughts on those?
Yeah, those all sound like good ideas. And I mean, I'm sort of interested in, I guess you could say, VR or eye tracking and stuff like that, where, for example, you could, when you don't know a word, you could like look at it and then get the like definition just from looking at it or something like that. And you can imagine a lot of ways to like slightly improve the efficiency of like learning like that. And yeah, that would all be cool too. We're like slowly getting there technology wise, probably in like the next couple of years. So like the first person who makes a Japanese learning app on a VR headset, they would be able to explore stuff like that. So
yeah, it's one of those things where it's so like, you know, VR was one of those technologies that I still feel like I've got a brother-in-law that works in AR, augmented reality, and it's still like, hey man, when's that going to take off? You've been doing that for a while now. Like, we're still not there, man. And so it's like, it seems like the initial public reception of the technology of AI is, I don't know, it seems a little bit more immediately promising to the end user. So hopefully we'll see more cool stuff there.
Yep.
So as far as community questions, we still have a handful of these. Let's go ahead and start knocking some out. So, Alex Mars Cat says, serious question. I have a problem with grammar. I've tried watching the grammar videos. Basically, they name off a lot of different grammar videos that they've watched. Name off a lot of different deck types, including the Doth grammar deck. They've even tried making their own grammar deck. I try to search grammar while I'm reading, but I still am bad at grammar. I cannot pass the grammar quizzes in the THEMOEWAY. I had an awful time when I took the JLPT and won this December. I can read paperback light novels if it's a slice of life, boys love, and I can understand it while searching for words, but my grammar still seems to hold me back. How can I get better at grammar, and how did you approach grammar?
Yeah, I think this is also like depends on the person. As I said earlier, I did a bunch of linguistic stuff, and that said, the linguistic stuff doesn't really cover quote unquote grammar points that you might find in like N1 grammar tests. I find those things to be closer to vocabulary, actually, in the sense that it's just some random word that's kind of grammar, but it's basically a word that you need to learn right? And especially in the N1 grammar points, some of them are not that common in like normal speech or even normal books. So you can come across them if you just like read a lot, right? And in my opinion, that's what I would recommend. Like, there's no point in biasing your learning order to try and learn N1 grammar points early on, right? Unless you're trying to pass the N1, but I don't think that's like even a good goal, honestly. Like unless you need to pass N1 for some reason, or you find it to be like a really good motivation for you, who like really cares, right? So I think it's better to just naturally learn stuff. And yeah, in my case, I would recommend if you want to learn that sort of stuff that would show up in these grammar points, then yeah, I'd read more novels and business related stuff, and I don't know, something like newspapers, and just like read a lot.
Yeah, I think that's really fair advice. Doth, you have anything to say about that as far as alternatives on picking up grammar?
I mean, he mentioned a Doth deck. I don't remember making a deck. Sorry, I guess. But yeah, I guess read a lot. Do your best to interpret as you can. I was always one to just, believe in the ambiguity. Unless you really need to be 100% correct, then you actually look into everything as you can. But yeah, hopefully it's just a time thing, like a volume thing, not really a, grammar thing. So
yeah. I think so. I spent a lot of time doing like almost isolated Japanese grammar study. It did not get me very far, so I can't really recommend doing that. I really like what Darius said about just treating it like vocab, because as far as I'm concerned, that's been the part that's worked, is stop focusing on so many grammar points, just focus on vocab as a whole and mix those ones into the mix as you continue to reveal more of them through your immersion and can actually have your own personal experiences with them. That's what's been really useful for me, because I tried to grind out a couple JLPT points, but it hasn't really stuck until I see it like 4 times out in the wild myself.
Right. And there's like different types of grammar, right? So the stuff at the very beginning, like past tense form and like passive form and stuff, it's probably worth like quickly reading about that just so you're not like completely lost or something. Like, it's worth going through a basic grammar guide once. Mm-hmm. For sure. But like beyond that, like I think it's really just immersion. Yeah.
Fair enough. All right. So Shopai asked, do you think it's better to read tons and tons of easy material very quickly or work through a more difficult book more slowly? Should we do both for max gains? So what's your thoughts on hard stuff versus easy stuff, I guess?
Yeah. Again, I should say before all my advice that the thing that actually matters is what's fun for you and not efficiency. I feel like I've said this like a billion times, but just to say again. But that said, I think what's most efficient is, read at your level and read a lot at your level. And don't unnecessarily read hard stuff because you won't understand it and it'll take you a lot of time. That said, I don't know. I've read hard stuff that was beyond my level, so it won't kill you either. So
I think you got to test it every now and again, right? Like it's not so much of doing. I mean, comprehensible input's the important part, but giving yourself a challenge every now and then is rewarding as well. It's just you'll burn out if you stick to it too long. The hard part.
Also, at the very beginning, when we're talking like, should you be reading children's books or something like that? I don't think you necessarily need to do that.
Yeah.
Like, I think you can start at something for like middle schoolers, something like young adult or manga or, something that's not too crazy. It doesn't need to be like for children, in my opinion.
So Julian asks, how did reading change your view of the language, your non-reading abilities, related abilities, if at all? So yeah, what was the impact of being a late reader, starting to read, and how did that impact your other abilities?
I would say it's mostly improved my passive vocab because that's what reading does. So my ability to comprehend things that I wouldn't have been able to comprehend otherwise. Also, to some degree, it affects my output in that like I'm able to make references to a portion of those things that I passively learned and sound more intellectual when I do so. That's about it. Yeah.
Fair enough. So do you have a favorite dictionary for pitch and definitions? This is another Julian question.
That's a good question. So unfortunate reality is let's talk about pitch first. There is no good dictionary for pitch. All of the monolingual dictionaries have issues with the pitch accents that they have in the dictionary. Usually the issue is that they're too traditional and they're listing pitches that no one in their 30s or even 40s or like even older people now get influenced by the younger people's pitches. So even older people use the new pitches much of the time. So like these old pitches in dictionaries are like pretty outdated, and depending on the dictionary, it will have that issue more or less, right? So for example, DAIJISEN has like really outdated pitch accents in it. NHK kind of has traditional accents listed in it. Sankoku has some newer stuff, but it also tends to be traditional. DAIJISEN is probably the best in terms of having the modern pitch listed in it. However, DAIJISEN has this issue where it sometimes lists, so it has an order of the pitches that it lists for a given word when a word can be said with multiple pitches, and sometimes the order it lists pitches in like is a little eyebrow raising in terms of like it lists a weird one first. So I think they didn't really pay that much attention to what order they're listing the pitches in, and as a result, as a reader, you can't really rely on it as much. But it does have the benefit that at least it does list the modern pitch in one of the slots. So yeah, that's the unfortunate reality with pitch. One of the projects that I really want to do actually is create a better dictionary for pitch than the monolingual dictionaries, because I use Monokakido, which is an app for legally acquiring Japanese dictionaries, and you can like search them and stuff. And in that app, it has a bookmark feature, and I bookmark all of the dictionary entries for words where I don't like agree with the pitch that the dictionary is listing, right? And I think I have like maybe 300 or 400 words marked across like different dictionaries. So I could fairly easily convert that into a dictionary, right? Where I just list what I've found to be the most common pitch for a word in actual speech in Tokyo. And I want to do that as a project, so I'll probably do that at some point, maybe next year.
Where do you, I mean, if the dictionaries are wrong, who do you trust?
My ears. I mean, there's lots of places where you can find content and like search content. So like you can search a word and get like hits in anime or something like that. There's like a website out there that does that. And if you do that and you also like say live in Japan or have Japanese friends, you can hear them talk, of course. So yeah, eventually you just build your own understanding of what the right pitch of a word is. And yeah, that's what you trust.
Gotcha. So moving on to community, I know you've already talked a little bit about a couple that you've been involved in. What have been the top communities that have influenced you, and which ones would you recommend to people?
Okay. I mean, yeah, I've been doing this for like 15 plus years, right? So I've been in a lot of communities. Some of them don't exist anymore. The one I started out with was the Freenode one. Right. I don't think that's very active these days. I've been on the Stack Exchange, Japanese language Stack Exchange, which isn't really a community, but it's a really high quality source for like good answers. So if you have like, a very unique question that isn't already answered, that's a great place to ask it, because there's a couple native speakers on there who are like really, really good. Like they're really analytical, they speak English well, and they can give like super good answers to like, I don't know, unusual questions about the language. So it's a really useful resource in that sense. For example, if you just go through any answers from a poster called Naruto or a poster called Broccoli Forest, and like there's a couple other people who are like really, really high quality. You can just read through their answers and it's like really educational. So that's one place I've always liked being a part of. Another one, recently it's Discord, right? So Discord, I'm in a couple different places. I'm in EJLX. I'm in THEMOEWAY, obviously. I'm also in the Refold server. And I mean, it's just the major servers that I think most people are aware of. They're all good communities. It depends on like what you're looking for. Like each one has like a different level of dedication to actually learning the language. I would say the THEMOEWAY is most quote unquote like hardcore in some sense, where there's a lot of people who are dedicating multiple hours per day to learning. And as a result, I think it's probably the best if you want to do that, right? So it'll give you access to a lot of people, a lot of content who, a lot of these people who are like really studying hard and like can motivate you to study harder. And you're not surrounded by people who are being lazy, right? So it's good in that sense. Other communities, EJLX is really big and has probably like the most Japanese people in it. And it can be a good place to like find people to talk on voice with in Japanese. There's also like a bunch of like really friendly people there. So if you're like looking for like a more just like chill, like social place to not necessarily learn super hardcore, then I think that's a good server. Refold, if you like the Refold method, then obviously it's a good place to be. I actually helped them run their like fluency test. It used to be some Japanese guy doing it, and he was like, Darius, please do it because I'm quitting Discord. Okay, whatever. So I run it now, and yeah, it's a nice place. If you want to get your Japanese evaluated by me, you can go there. And yeah, I guess that's about it in terms of communities.
On the KanjiEater Discord server, huh? All right. I'll have to send you the invite after this.
Send me the invite.
Sounds good. What about so through your experiences with all these different servers, all these different people, 15 years, anybody in particular that you kind of look up to or that's helped you out along on this journey? That was from Bladewood.
Interesting question. Yeah, I mean, I look up to a lot of people because there's a lot of people out there, for example, like Ham and Doth on this call, who are like really good at Japanese, especially like in their own way, in some facet, right? Like everyone has their strengths in the language, and like that can be very motivating, right? Like Doth probably knows kanji stuff like way better than I do. Ham obviously knows like the legal stuff and like that sort of Japanese surrounding that way better than I do. So like it's motivating to see them do that and how they did that and their journey and what motivated them and all that stuff. So that's always good to see. Also, like earlier on, there was like a couple friends I had made on IRC. One guy, his name is like Flaming Spinach. Another one is FOTC. These are like my really old friends from the IRC days, and they're also like really good at Japanese because they've been learning for even longer than I've been, and like basically doing immersion before like it was a method, right? So yeah, these people I've been friends with for a long time have always been motivating for me as people who are like really, really good. Yeah.
Akabaka and Bladewood asks, would you make any changes that you would make to the THEMOEWAY, being such an active member there? Anything that, got any vision you want to shed for us?
I mean, I'm not actually officially affiliated with that server in any way. I'm just like a user there. But yeah, as an active member, I guess, I don't know. I think I would say think about like how to evolve it to the next stage, because it's getting really, really big. And like there's certain things which you need to start being careful with, like I don't know, the amount of pirated content, and
there's none. Don't worry about it, guys. Like
if there were any people potentially sharing such things, you would need to be careful about those things. And also, as you attract like a wider variety of people, just like making sure that it continues to be like a really friendly pace and doesn't get like too toxic or unmanageable or something like that. But I think these are things that the management, the staff there, like, are aware of, and they're like constantly working on, and I think they do a good job. So yeah.
Fair enough. Rose and JNEAPAN say tips for succeeding as a translator or interpreter in Japan. Anything? Have you been doing that in Japan as well? I know you talked a little bit about the cons and that sort of thing.
So I continue to do the cons. I like fly back
really?
To do this, yeah. And also I do like the business side for them in Japan. So like meet with the companies and stuff as well. Yeah. And that said, I'm not like a professional interpreter, so to speak. Like that's not how I earn my day-to-day money, right? So yeah, advice is I guess just practice, right? So practice it, improve your base Japanese level, watch other people do it, try to interpret it along as they are doing it. Yeah, I don't think I have any special advice. Pretty generic. Yep.
Fair enough. This. Oh, go ahead, Doth. What you got?
Yeah. I mean, one big question I think that hasn't been asked yet. What are your thoughts on burnout? Have you ever burnt out, and how do you cope? So.
I've never burnt out on Japanese. Yeah. Not once.
Chad.
It depends on what you mean by burnout, right? Because like I said earlier, I would have like bursts where I was reading and then I wasn't reading. I was doing something else. But I just always had like a number of different activities that I would go from one to the other. And the social stuff always keeps me motivated. So like whether that's like the Discord side of it of like other learners or the like more like friend side of it with my Japanese friends, like that's always going to be there. And like it keeps me interested. So yeah, I really have never burnt out, so to speak. But I also don't really do any like quote unquote study that one could like burn out from in the first place. So yeah.
Does that sound familiar, Ham? Like do you ever burn out with Japanese?
Like the language? No.
Yeah. So the key here, it sounds like, is guys just don't burn out. Like there you go.
Just don't stuff that will make you burn out. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
like for me, I prioritize what I want to do always. I don't read something because it's hard. I read it because I want to read it. I don't read it because it's going to help. I read it because I want to read it. Same with watching, talking. If you're doing things you like, you're not going to burn out. You know?
Absolutely.
Don't put pressure on yourself.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Yep.
All right, let's skip on down to content recommendations. Okay, we're getting close to the end here, Darius. Content. What your go-to anime? What you got for us?
Okay, yeah, it's not like a recommendation in the sense of it will help you learn Japanese. It's just a recommendation in the sense of.
Yep.
So I really like Ghost in the Shell, the original 1995 movie by SHIMAMURA. That's like my favorite movie. I actually like rewatch that occasionally, and it's been interesting. I think I've rewatched it like over 10 times now over the years, and I can see my like Japanese improve as I rewatch it, right? Because like at the beginning I was completely relying on the English subtitles. Then there's points where I would be able to pick up certain things by myself. Then there is a point where like I was able basically to watch it raw, but still losing like maybe 10% of the details because it's a really hard show in terms of like the like political random topics and like SF topics that they randomly go into, right? So, and then I remember when I learned pitch accent, and I rewatched Ghost in the Shell, I was like, holy shit. Everything I thought was emotion was actually literally just pitch accent, and I had been missing the like emotional delivery of like half of the lines, and it was such like a stark difference for me because I'd seen that show enough times to like remember the lines, how they sounded like before I like understood pitch accent and after, and it was like actually really different. So that was also interesting for me. These days I can watch it and there's still like a word or two in there which I've never seen anywhere else. Like
that's surprising.
Yeah. So yeah, and yeah, so it's still like a good. I don't know what you would call it. What's it called?
Milestone
like,
or
benchmark.
Benchmark. Yeah.
Yeah, for how good my Japanese is. And anyways, yeah, it's a really good work, so I highly recommend it.
Fair enough. Any other deep weeb anime recommendations there, Darius?
For more recent stuff, I guess I really liked Made in Abyss.
Good choice.
Like a really show. That's still a little while ago. Even more recent, I like Spy Family a lot. It's more just like a chill out and relax show for me, but that's very high quality. Yeah, I haven't been watching that much lately. So
have you watched Golden Kamuy yet?
Not yet.
Dude, like
I had a feeling for it, right? Movie came out soon.
I don't know. I don't know when the live action one's coming out, but please, Darius.
I know Spy Family has a new movie. Like it just came out, I think. So
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, real quick. Any manga or not manga, anime that you particularly don't like? Because I saw we had one on common here on your list, Darius, which was K-On! I mean, if anybody stuck around at this point and, you know, they're big Moe fans, they're probably hanging up at this point. But I saw Darius gave it a 3. And I was like, that's exactly what I would give it. It was like, that was the first thing that I immersed with as like a Japanese show. And I got to say, I was real close. I've never experienced burnout, but K-On! Was pretty close.
Yeah.
It's over.
I was never a fan of, I don't know, slice of life stuff shows. Yeah, I just can't get into it. So, yeah, but that's different for different people. So I wouldn't not recommend it. I would say check it out, and if you don't like it, then stay away from it.
It sounds like the title of this video is going to be K-On! Denounced. All right. Any favorite manga picks, Darius?
Yes. So I really like the manga author Hoshimi Shuzo. He is the author of Aku no Hana and Happiness and Chi no Wadachi and a couple other manga like that. They're like very, very dark manga and like very like psychological, and I really, really like them. I actually generally do not like manga, and those are the few manga that I was actually able to get really, really into. So highly recommended.
And they're really good for beginners. I would definitely recommend that as one of the earliest mangas that you can read. Any of those that Darius just mentioned, actually. And then he's actually got a new one coming out that's based on some video series that's coming out too. I think it's going to drop in February if I remember right. But yeah, that's actually my wife's favorite. So I'm a big fan of Hoshimi Shuzo as well.
Right, and the one caveat is don't read it if you don't want to get like traumatically scarred.
Absolutely.
It's pretty dark. So.
Yep. Yeah. Any other favorite Japanese content that we should be aware of? What else sticks out as some top series that any sort of variety shows that you just liked in general, games, content, whatever?
Yeah, so in novel series, I would say if you're trying to break into fantasy that's not like novel fantasy, like more like the stuff I was mentioning with Green Saga earlier in the Japanese part of this, I would recommend the Moribito series, Seirei no Moribito, I think is the first one. I've forgotten. And that's a really good series because it isn't super hard. So it's kind of hard because it's that high fantasy stuff, but it's still meant to be for young adults and like kids. So I think it's a good place to start if you're going to start. It's better than ARSLAN, SENKI, or Green Saga for sure in terms of approachability. So and it's pretty well written, so I'd recommend that series. Yeah.
That's interesting that you draw a distinction between light novels and the other series that you just mentioned, because having not done a whole bunch of research on this specific topic, I'm just like, ARSLAN SENKI is just like a light novel before they were coining that term. But yeah. What's your...
It is. Oh, exactly. It is a light novel before light novels existed, but the difference, one is that there's no first person like narration at all, like in the head of like a really like angsty teenager, which
fair enough.
Amongst a lot of light novels, which makes me hate it.
Yeah.
And there's very little like light novel tropes or anime tropes in it, so to speak.
That's true.
And the lines don't make me cringe, right? Yeah. The like lines are pretty cool sounding overall. The characters are relatable for an adult. They're not all kids. Yeah, it's just stuff like that, which
not a cast of little girls with, you know, triple D cup. Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's go on to wrapping this up. We're going to talk about what your next steps are, Darius. So B45 asks, what's next for Japanese from here, man?
I like mastery, so just continue polishing it, even though there isn't really a need to do so. But, you know, I work here now, so the more you can polish it, the more you can effectively use it in your day-to-day life, right? So, yeah, like I mentioned earlier, continue to improve pitch accent, continue to improve my expressiveness, continue to improve passive vocab, active vocab, all those things.
Great. And then what goals do you have for working and living in Japan? I know that really what you just led into, but what are the goals for working and living there at this point?
So, I mean, I'm not sure what I want to do long term because I just moved here a year ago and I'm still like feeling it out. That said, I like it a lot so far and I have no issues with it. So I might end up staying here for a while. My job is fun so far. I'm getting like progressively more responsibility there and having a good time. So probably just going to continue doing that for the short term, at least. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. And then our closing question, what's one piece of advice that you give to others that are looking to learn and then make use of their Japanese, similar to what you did, sir?
Biggest piece of advice is to have a good time and don't like kill yourself doing some stupid study method. It's really like, it's your life, right? So you shouldn't waste your life having a bad time. And if you have a good time, you're more likely to continue and hit like a higher level of mastery with it, if that's something that interests you. On the other hand, if there's like other goals you have, like just traveling there for a while or passing a test for some reason or whatever, then that's all fine too. And that should have its own strategies, right? So whatever works for you.
Beautiful. Well, thank you everyone so much for tuning in to an extra long Deep Weeb podcast with Darius. You guys had a lot of questions for him and he answered basically all of them. So be sure to go ask him some more in the THEMOEWAY. And I guess now we'll go ahead and wrap up the show. So Darius, where can people find you on the internet?
Yeah, I'm pretty much everywhere. Definitely on Discord. I think it's Darius0010. I hope that's right. And yeah, I'm also on Twitter, also on the Japanese Language Stack Exchange, in the various Discord communities I mentioned. I like talking to people. Probably don't DM me with like a million questions because I won't be able to answer them all. It's probably better to ask in like a public space where other people can answer and then I can answer anything that doesn't get answered there. And yeah, that's it. I'm happy to take questions. I love meeting people, so feel free to reach out.
Perfect. Doth, where can people find you online?
Discord, the Doth, just a username.
Beautiful. Ham, where are you at these days, man?
I am offline.
He's done it again, folks. He's cut the internet cord again.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. So I haven't checked any. I have like 100 messages I haven't looked at, stuff like that. Right now I'm in a Kaikatsu club. So, I mean, man, see you on the other side, right?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so and you guys can of course follow me at the usual places. Links are in the description. Please do give this one a like and subscribe. Be sure to share this one so that other people can get the good news of Darius. All right,